The shadows of a rundown alley swallow the silhouette of a hooded young man. Behind him, two street thugs lounge on the concrete steps. One spits out a glob of saliva to pick a fight, but it splatters right next to his buddy's boot. While the thugs curse and bicker, our hooded lone wolf just keeps walking, completely unbothered. Welcome to the studio district. A chaotic, filth-ridden neighborhood where the noise never sleeps and hope goes to die. Tucked away in this concrete jungle sits his pathetic 180-square-foot rooftop shack. Staring at his dinner, he lets out a heavy sigh. Instant cup ramen. Again. Meet Bong Juyuk. 25 years old, officially unemployed, and working himself to the absolute bone. Between shifts at the convenience store, the barbecue joint, and back-breaking day labor, he is barely surviving. That is right, this exhausted young man is our main character. But no matter how hard he grinds, his bank account remains utterly empty. The reason is tragically simple. A mountain of soul-crushing debt. A debt he must bleed to pay off, armed with absolutely zero special talents. He is nothing more than a disposable gear in society's machine. A bright, shining future? That is a luxury he cannot afford, as he drowns in the misery of his bottom-feeder existence. Ding! A glowing blue screen shatters the reality before him. The system announces his awakening. Juyuk freezes dead in his tracks. Half-chewed noodles dangle from his gaping mouth. Cold sweat instantly drenches his pale face as his pupils tremble in pure shock. The scalding broth snaps him back to reality. He fumbles the cup, splashing boiling noodles everywhere, screaming that he nearly had a heart attack. His mind spins in absolute chaos. In this world, awakening is the ultimate blessing. It is the golden ticket to strike it rich and flip your miserable destiny upside down. A cosmic jackpot infinitely better than winning any lottery. But here is the brutal catch. You can only enjoy that wealth if you survive. Stepping foot inside a tower is essentially walking straight into hell's jaws. You could be ripped to shreds by demonic beasts. Frozen solid or burned to ash in extreme biomes, melted by lethal venom, or crushed into meat paste by a hidden dungeon trap. Juyuk is the ultimate survivor through cowardice. See someone getting mugged? He masterfully looks the other way. He dodges danger like his life depends on it, to the absolute extreme of never even walking near a construction site. For 25 years, he fully embraced his destiny as a worthless nobody. Yet the system chose him. He is now an awakened player. Obviously, he thinks he is hallucinating. Just a pathetic fever dream brought on by chronic fatigue. But when he mentally commands the status window, flash, the holographic interface manifests. The data is undeniable. Affiliation, Black Tower, Korea. Level 1. And his innate trait? The power to command a single summon. His arsenal of trait skills includes targeted summon, random summon, and dismiss. Alongside his basic player rights, entering the tower once a day, and access to a dimensional inventory space. Staring at the glowing runes, reality finally sinks in. Every awakened receives a unique gift from the heavens known as a trait. The combat classes vary wildly, from divine swordsmanship and spear mastery to impenetrable shield arts, archery, and lethal martial arts, not to mention rare physical mutations like gigantification, or magical arts like healing and summoning. Within the summoner class, players typically command elemental spirits, ferocious phantom beasts, indestructible golems, or even terrifying demonic entities. It is widely revered as the power to command absolute loyalty from otherworldly creatures. Anticipation bubbles in his chest. What kind of legendary beast will answer his call? Riding the high of his awakening, he decides to test his newfound power with some dramatic flair. Striking his coolest pose, our boy dramatically roars, "Summon! Cue the cricket noises." Absolutely nothing happens. Blushing fiercely, he quickly mutters, "Random summon." Still nothing but the cold night breeze. Then, a sudden realization hits him like a brick. Skills cannot be activated in the real world. It is the absolute ironclad law of this universe. A player's supernatural abilities and magical skills are strictly confined within the walls of the tower. Other than manifesting the holographic interface, an awakened outside the tower is completely indistinguishable from a helpless civilian. Any rookie with a smartphone knows this basic fact. He cringes hard, feeling like an absolute fool. He is dead certain that defying the system's laws is utterly impossible. But then, ding! A warning message flashes. Initializing random summon sequence. Juyuk's jaw drops as the impossible unfolds before his very eyes. A blinding portal of light tears through the fabric of space, and from the dimensional gateway steps out a man. Juyuk looks like he has seen a ghost. Sweating buckets, his eyes bulging out of his skull, his mind short-circuits trying to comprehend this rule-breaking anomaly. To make matters even more absurd, the summoned entity is a living, breathing person. The mysterious stranger confirms his pure human status and hits him with a crisp, nonchalant salute. Juyuk's brain completely stalls. He successfully bypassed the tower's restrictions, and instead of drawing an elemental spirit or a mighty golem, he pulled a literal human being. Suddenly, the stranger's nose twitches. His eyes lock onto the spilled instant noodles like a starved beast. With shameless excitement, he begs for just one bite. Utterly defeated by the sheer absurdity, Juhyuk weakly mutters, "Sure." Like a kid in a candy store, the red-haired eccentric snatches up the cheap ramen. In the background, our main character stands paralyzed like a stone statue. The legendary creature he expected turned out to be a shameless, ramen-stealing freeloader. Slurp, slurp. The obnoxious sound of violent noodle vacuuming echoes across the rooftop. The red-haired guy immediately starts profusely sweating from the heat. Juhyuk scoffs in pure disbelief. What kind of weakling thinks mild udon flavor is actually spicy? Brushing past the culinary critique, the burning question remains. How on earth did a system skill manifest in the real world and a human summoned to top it off? This defies every known law of the awakened. Summoning his status window once more, his eyes lock onto a mind-blowing revelation. His specific trait targets humans and demi-humans, and the power scaling is pure gacha madness. Rank scale from R-grade rare, soaring through SR grade super rare and SSR grade special super rare, all the way to the mythic zenith. LSSR grade, legend special super rare. On top of that, a telepathic link forged an unbreakable bond between master and servant, allowing flawless communication no matter the circumstances. A rarity system? The revelation left him utterly bewildered. It felt exactly like pulling a gacha in some fantasy mobile game. Suddenly, glowing system text materialized in the air. He was now bound by the absolute laws of the three mandates. First, the summoned entity must prioritize their master's survival above all else. Second, the summoner's words are absolute law, demanding unquestioning obedience. And the third, absolute rule. Should the master's orders ever threaten their own survival, the first mandate of protection reigns supreme. Unquestioning obedience? Now that sounded like music to his ears. But it begged the million-dollar question. Just what kind of monster had he dragged into reality? The glowing blue interface flickered, revealing the hidden truth. Name: Jon Kasac, the notorious mad dog of the Cruel Assassin Guild. Classification: a human assassin with a terrifying super rare rating. His manifestation time limit sat squarely at 6 hours, ignoring any satisfaction metrics, with a mandatory 3-hour cooldown phase upon dismissal. The system practically flashed warning signs. This guy wasn't just a headache for his dark guild. He was a bloodthirsty, unhinged lunatic. Yet, his blood-soaked track record boasted a staggering 99% success rate. He even had the head of a fifth circle dark mage to his name. An overwhelming torrent of data crashed into Juhyuk's mind. He gripped his skull in agony before suddenly plummeting through a void of endless darkness. Just before hitting the abyss, a shadowy figure emerged from the gloom. He instinctively threw up his arms to block. But the phantom assassin phased right through him, completely unaware of his presence. As the gruesome scene unfolded around him, a chilling realization set in. He was bearing witness to the phantom's bloody past. The madman danced through his enemies, severing heads with terrifying grace. But the true horror lay in the aftermath. He lovingly wrapped the severed trophies in red ribbons. A true artist of slaughter. The phantom paused, casting a cold glance over his shoulder. His legend ended with one fatal mistake, stepping into his final target's domain. Unfortunately for him, that target was the Empire's apex predator, the Grand Swordmaster. Before the assassin could even draw his blade, a blinding flash of aura cleaved him in two, sealing his grim fate forever. Snapped back to reality, Juhyuk felt a glacial chill down his spine. The assassin whispered from the shadows behind him, asking what occupied his master's thoughts. Juhyuk nearly jumped out of his skin, stumbling backward in sheer terror. His legs betrayed him. He wildly flailed his arms, letting out a pathetic yelp before hitting the floor. The phantom killer tilted his head innocently. He harbored no malicious intent, simply awaiting his new lord's divine commands. Swallowing his mounting dread, Juhyuk desperately composed himself. After all, the system had promised absolute supremacy over this shadow walker. Inhaling sharply, he issued his very first, earth-shattering decree. Clean up the leftover ramen pot and scrub the dining table spotless. The deadly assassin moved like the wind. Juhyuk watched in stunned silence as the phantom executed the domestic chores with terrifying speed and zero objections. The place was spotless in mere seconds. Still skeptical of his newfound authority, Juhyuk decided to push the boundaries of this so-called loyalty. The killer knelt, vowing that his master's word was his absolute reality. So, Juhyuk threw down the ultimate gauntlet of humiliation. He ordered the fearsome killer to bark. A command to act like a literal mutt. The rag paused in the assassin's deadly hands. Silence hung heavy in the air. A cold sweat broke out across Juhyuk's forehead. Had he pushed too far? This man was an unparalleled predator in his past life. His killer's pride would surely ignite a bloodbath. He braced for the inevitable flash of a blade. But instead of a war cry, A cheerful, enthusiastic bark echoed through the room, leaving Juyuk utterly paralyzed with disbelief. Jaw practically glued to the floor, Juyuk slowly raised a trembling thumbs up. The absolute obedience was terrifyingly real. But before he could celebrate, a violent hammering shattered the peace of his front door. Brutal voices roared from the hallway, demanding he show himself. His stomach dropped into an abyss. Today was the deadline for his crushing loan interest. Panic seized his heart. He frantically waved for the assassin to stand down. The grim reality was, Juyuk owed a soul-crushing 10 million won. Blacklisted by every legitimate bank, he had sold his soul to the underworld's loan sharks. It all started when his father suffered a devastating fall on the winter ice, shattering his hip completely. Between the astronomical surgical fees and his younger brother's impending college tuition, he had been backed into a hopeless, suffocating corner. He had foolishly believed he could outrun the debt. Yet, despite bleeding over 5 million won into their pockets, the monstrous principal remained completely untouched. It was a deal with the devil, but what else could a desperate son do? Even if time rewound 100 times, he would gladly walk into hell again for his family. The thugs jeered from outside, mockingly asking about his well-being. Juhyuk's head snapped around, his eyes locking onto his summoned shadow. The mad dog's aura flared. A venomous dagger danced between his fingers, thirsting for the intruder's blood. But a massacre was the absolute last thing Juhyuk needed right now. One wrong word and this room would be painted crimson. He frantically ordered the assassin into the tiny bathroom, commanding him to freeze like a statue and seal his lips shut. The killer tilted his head, innocently questioning if drawing breath was still permitted. Juhyuk let out an exasperated sigh, granting him permission to simply stay alive. Steeling his nerves, he slowly unlocked the door. In a flash, a massive, suffocating grip clamped down fiercely on the back of his neck. A towering brute grinned with malice, his sinister eyes scanning Juhyuk's trembling frame. He purred with fake concern, claiming he feared the poor boy had fallen ill since the blood money hadn't arrived. Frozen like prey before a viper, Juhyuk stuttered out a frantic apology, swearing he had just wired the soul-crushing funds. The thug's smile twisted into a demonic sneer. He whispered that struggling was pointless, casually suggesting that a quick plunge of a scalpel could turn his organs into cold, hard cash. With a bone-chilling chuckle, the monster reminded him that a man only truly needed one kidney to survive in this cruel world. But the true nightmare was just beginning. From the shadows of the hallway, another thug's voice slithered out, mentioning the existence of his precious younger brother. The thug smirked, noting that a young brother could fetch a high price on the black market. At those vile words, a dark shadow fell over Juhyuk's eyes. Catching that murderous glare, the loan shark chuckled mockingly, daring him to throw a punch. But Juhyuk instantly masked his rage with a pathetic smile, insisting he would never dare. The thug scoffed, warning him to behave, or he would vanish without a trace. With a deafening slam of the door, the nightmare left. Juhyuk collapsed, letting out a heavy breath. Then, from the shadows of the bathroom, Jon emerged. Amazed, Juhyuk praised the assassin for staying completely undetected. Jon simply bowed his head, stating he was only following his master's absolute command. A crushing wave of exhaustion suddenly hit Juhyuk. Between grueling double shifts, his sudden awakening, summoning a human, and a deadly visit from loan sharks, his mind was completely fried. The mountain of debt made the dangerous tower seem like his only escape. But reality was cruel. A weak coward like him would be slaughtered on the first floor. Breaking the silence, Jon politely asked for his next orders. Exhausted, Juhyuk offered to dismiss the summon if the assassin wanted to return to his world. But to his absolute shock, Jon shyly asked if he could watch some television. How an otherworldly killer knew about modern broadcasting and instant noodles was a mystery, but Juhyuk was simply too tired to care. He gave him the green light, leaving the lethal assassin to binge-watch soap operas while he crashed on the bed. Despite Jon being a deadly summon, the quiet presence of another person felt surprisingly warm. For a young man who had been worked to the bone in absolute solitude, it was a rare moment of comfort. Darkness quickly claimed him. When his alarm blared at 8 in the morning, the apartment was empty. He assumed the summoning duration had naturally expired. It made perfect sense, especially since he vaguely remembered a glowing system window flashing in his dreams. Dragging himself out of bed, he turned on the morning news while preparing for another miserable shift. But as he lazily brushed his teeth, the anchor's voice sent chills down his spine. A massive bloodbath had occurred at the Smile Cash Loan Shark headquarters in Seoul. His eyes widened in absolute horror. When the reporter mentioned 3 decapitated bodies, his toothbrush clattered against the sink. The gruesome details were horrifying. The victims' heads had been neatly wrapped in bright red ribbons. One terrifying name echoed in his mind: Jon Kasac. The blood drained from his face. He hadn't just summoned an ally, he had unleashed a psychotic, cold-blooded killer into the modern world. The Smile Cash massacre dominated every channel. The crime scene was a river of blood, featuring shattered fingers and severed heads beautifully displayed like festive holiday gifts. Panic clamped around Jahyuk's throat. If the police traced this back to him, his life was officially over. Staring at the horrific screen, there was zero doubt left in his mind. This was an assassin's masterpiece. The trauma followed him straight to his convenience store shift. At the checkout counter, the customer's items morphed into the terrifying, ribbon-wrapped head of the loan shark. His mind completely broke. Everywhere he looked, headless torsos paraded around the aisles, and severed heads stared at him from the snack shelves. Terrified, he stumbled backward, crashing hard into the cigarette display. The illusion shattered as a confused customer asked if he was all right. Sweating profusely, he bowed in apology and rushed through the transaction. By the time his shift ended, he knew his shattered nerves could not handle another day of this. He immediately canceled all his shifts for the next day. Trudging home with a heavy sigh, a dark thought plagued him. Was he indirectly responsible for a brutal massacre? He nervously opened the system interface to check Jon's profile. The ominous text glared back at him. Title, The Crazy Assassin of the Cruel Guild. Rank, Super Rare. Class, Human Assassin. His stats revealed a manifestation limit of 6 hours, a 3-hour resummon cooldown, and a glaring 0 for his current satisfaction rating. The system guaranteed absolute loyalty to the master, but knowing a bloodthirsty maniac was at his beck and call still sent shivers down his spine. Taking a deep breath, he activated the summoning skill. But instead of the assassin, a blinding system prompt popped up, demanding a customer satisfaction review for his last summon. Rage bubbled up inside him. He had ordered the guy to watch television, and instead, the lunatic went on an unsanctioned killing spree. Fueled by pure spite, he hovered his finger over the 1-star rating. He even flipped off the glowing system screen just to vent his extreme frustration. But right as he was about to submit the terrible review, his conscience struck. Sighing in defeat, he compromised and tapped the 3-star option. Growing up, watching his mother struggle with customer service jobs, he knew firsthand the devastating emotional damage of a bad rating. He just could not do it. With a flash of light, Jon materialized. The deadly assassin flashed a blindingly bright smile, bowing deeply in gratitude for the 3-star review. With sparkling eyes, he vowed to spill even more blood to earn a perfect score next time. Looking at that incredibly pure, innocent expression, Juhyuk could barely believe this man was a butcher. Mustering his courage, he asked point-blank if he slaughtered the loan sharks. Without a single ounce of guilt, Jon beamed proudly, confirming he took out the trash last night. Juhyuk choked on his own breath, the horrific reality crashing down on him. Pure terror gripped his soul. He was sharing a tiny room with a merciless executioner. His heart pounded like a war drum as nausea twisted his stomach into knots. Digging his nails into his palms, he forced himself to breathe. He had to remember the system's absolute rule: a summoned being could never harm its master. Swallowing his fear, Juhyuk asked how he even found their hidden headquarters. Jon casually explained that he secretly planted a mark of pursuit skill on the thugs before they left. A tracking skill? Juhyuk's mind raced. But more importantly, why go to such insane lengths for a simple threat? The assassin's smile did not reach his cold eyes as he stated a brutal truth. They were enemies of his master, and enemies must be exterminated before they can strike. Desperate, Juhyuk yelled that he never gave the execution order, but Jon simply tilted his head, calmly reciting the deadly loophole, the summon's 3 laws, Article 3. The system was crystal clear. If Law 1 and Law 2 ever clashed, Law 1 reigned supreme. In short, absolute, unquestioning obedience. But there was a hidden loophole. If the summoner faced a life-threatening crisis, that rule could be completely shattered. Juhyuk narrowed his eyes, testing the waters. Would Jon disobey a direct order to kill his own master? Jon did not miss a single beat. He confirmed the theory instantly. Juhyuk pressed further, pointing out the absolute lack of immediate danger. He called out the knight's brutal actions as nothing but an arbitrary execution. A dark smile played on Jon's lips. He calmly admitted that Article 3 left plenty of room for creative interpretation. In the terrifying summon's eyes, those loan sharks were ticking time bombs, filth that would inevitably threaten his master's life one day. To him, eradicating them now was simply a perfectly logical purge. Juhyuk shuddered, calling the logic straight out of a psychopath's playbook. He flinched, quickly apologizing for the harsh slip of the tongue. But Jon just shrugged it off. Such dark titles were basically old nicknames to him. Juhyuk sighed, aggressively rubbing his temples. It was not that he failed to grasp the twisted loyalty, but this trigger-happy mindset was a catastrophic disaster waiting to happen. He frantically painted a picture for the lethal summon. Imagine they were just strolling down an ordinary street and accidentally bumped shoulders with some random street thug. Naturally, the punk would bark out empty, venomous threats, spitting trash talk like, "Do you have a death wish? I will gouge your eyes out." It was just meaningless bravado. But with Jon's twisted, lethal logic, that thug would instantly lose his head, neatly severed from his body before he could even blink. The sheer headache of it all was overwhelming. Surprisingly, Jon bowed his head, admitting his absolute fault. Juhyuk jumped back, utterly baffled as the overpowered monster suddenly dropped to his knees. Desperation laced Juhyuk's voice. He pleaded that slaughtering people did not protect him at all. If anything, leaving a massive trail of corpses would only drag him into a living nightmare. Jon's golden eyes gleamed with chilling confidence. He simply whispered, "Not if there are no witnesses left alive to tell the tale." Juhyuk begged him to drop the assassin mindset, but Jon refused to make empty promises. Pushed to the absolute brink, Juhyuk demanded an ironclad vow. No killing unless a literal blade was pressing directly against his master's throat. No more bloody executions based on mere suspicion. Jon finally yielded, vowing to assess threats with perfect clarity. His response boomed with unexpected, terrifying enthusiasm. With the ground rules finally established, Juhyuk practically begged the terrifying knight to return to the summon space. But Jon remained planted, shifting the heavy atmosphere. "Are you not going to challenge the tower, master?" The question struck Juhyuk like a physical blow, completely shattering his fragile peace of mind. He knew the harsh reality. Awakening was a golden ticket, a once-in-a-lifetime miracle. But sheer terror gripped his soul. The tower was a merciless meat grinder for the unprepared. One wrong step meant absolute death. Seeking validation, Juhyuk nervously asked about the distant past. Had anyone else ever managed to summon this monstrous being before him? Jon's gaze grew heavy, confirming the truth. The previous master was a titan of courage, an undeniably heroic soul. A crushing wave of shame crashed right into Juhyuk's chest. The contrast was absolutely sickening. True awakeners forged their destinies to save humanity. Staring at the floor, Juhyuk weakly confessed his pathetic truth. He possessed absolutely zero courage to lay his life on the line. Jon opened his mouth to respond, but Juhyuk bitterly cut him off. He ruthlessly mocked himself, labeling his own existence as nothing but a cowardly failure. But the knight's next words shattered all expectations. "You are the absolute peak of summoners, master." Juhyuk blinked, completely stunned. Jon declared that a true summoner's greatest weapon was extreme paranoia and survival. In the chaotic world of awakeners, reckless bravery was a lethal poison. A fearless master was a walking liability, sprinting headfirst toward an unpredictable, grisly demise. And if the master perished, the summons would be dragged right back into the endless void. Jon violently beat his chest, swearing an absolute oath. He alone would bathe in blood and handle all the dirty work. He fiercely cheered his master on, urging him to hide safely and live a long, peaceful life. Yet that night, Juhyuk tossed and turned in pure agony. The looming shadow of the tower haunted his every dream. By dawn, he had made his final choice. The life of a daring conqueror was not his destiny. He just wanted to bow his head in pure gratitude, thankful that his crushing debt was erased alongside those gangsters. A quiet, perfectly ordinary life was all he craved. If he just worked his fingers to the bone, surely the heavens would grant him peace. Ring! The sudden vibration of his phone shattered the morning silence. The caller ID flashed brightly. It was his father. He softly asked about his father's physical rehab, but the response was a devastating gut punch. They were being forced to transfer to a much more expensive hospital, and his mother had just lost her job. Despite the crumbling world around them, his father forced a warm, gentle tone, telling his son not to carry the heavy burden alone, claiming he only called to hear his voice after days of silence. Swallowing the massive lump in his throat, Juhyuk promised to visit soon so they could share a warm meal. His father's final words begged him not to break his own back working. Click. The call ended, but reality had already violently shifted. Desperation completely replaced his lingering fear. Moments later, he strapped on every piece of heavy-duty safety gear he could find. He frantically rationalized the terrifying leap. He would only step into the first floor. Just a quick peek into the abyss, and the second things looked deadly, he would instantly hit the exit. The stars had agonizingly aligned. Since he had already cleared his schedule of all part-time labor, the path into the hellish dungeon was wide open. He raised his trembling hand to activate the summoning circle, but suddenly hesitated. Wait a minute. Did he really have to rely on that absolute psycho? A glimmer of greedy hope sparked in his eyes. What if he pulled an entirely new hero? Maybe a legendary, special, super rare tier would descend. But the system ruthlessly crushed his dreams. The random gacha was locked. A massive, glaring red cooldown timer blocked his path. 28 days, 11 hours, 8 minutes, and 37 agonizing seconds remaining. He stared at the glowing letters in absolute disbelief. A whole damn month of waiting? Defeated by the brutal system mechanics, he had no choice but to call upon his unhinged knight. Guilt gnawed at his conscience. Did the terrifying summon somehow know about his master's attempted betrayal? Refusing to meet those piercing golden eyes, Juhyuk finally declared their descent into the tower. A terrifyingly proud grin stretched across Jon's face, praising his master's newfound bravery. But a second later, the knight frantically waved his hands. No! Cancel that! Cowardice is the absolute key to our survival. Ju Hyuk wiped his cold sweat, swearing this was just a simple hit-and-run scouting mission. Jon immediately pointed at the master's pathetic safety gear. Toss that garbage away. I alone will be your ultimate weapon and absolute hunting dog. The overpowering aura flared as Jon made his unholy vow. Once they crossed that threshold, he would annihilate every single obstacle in their path. The master would not have to lift a single precious finger. Ding! The chilling blue system window materialized right before his eyes. Would you like to enter the Korea Black Tower? Target destination, the first floor. Taking a shaky, desperate breath, Ju Hyuk confirmed the prompt. Instantly, gravity vanished. The world warped around them as they plunged headfirst into the endless abyss. A blood-curdling scream escapes his lungs as Jon desperately clings to his clothes. Suddenly, the very fabric of reality warps. Ju Hyuk is violently sucked into a blinding digital abyss. His body plummets endlessly as a torrential rain of light and system codes rush past him. He gasps, his heart hammering in pure terror. All color drains from his face. He squeezes his eyes shut, panic consuming his mind as the glowing void drags him deeper into the unknown. Jon fiercely tightens his grip, locking them together as they plunge downward. With a heavy thud, they finally hit solid ground. Opening his eyes, Ju Hyuk discovers a desolate wasteland. Welcome to the first floor. The spatial distortion takes its toll. A wave of intense nausea hits him hard, and he instantly empties his stomach onto the barren dirt. Jon checks on his summoner, calmly reassuring him that the motion sickness will pass with time. Without missing a beat, the loyal summon takes the lead, and they confidently step past the boundaries of the safe zone. Ding! The system's grace washes over Ju Hyuk, instantly upgrading his physical stats to match his new level. His unique traits and combat skills are finally unlocked and ready for action. So this is what it truly means to be a player. Even at a mere level 1, explosive vitality courses through his veins. He feels completely reborn. A system window flashes before his eyes. The first floor mission has been issued. He must slaughter 5 tough-skinned fatty grubs within a strict 2-hour time limit. The kill counter sits firmly at 0 out of 5. Failure means forfeiture, or worse, death. Up ahead, Jon spots their prey. Ju Hyuk steels his nerves, knowing this first floor is merely a testing ground for his awakened potential. In the grand scheme of the tower, these tough-skinned fatty grubs are nothing more than training dummies. Their offensive capabilities are virtually non-existent, a complete joke. However, their notoriously thick hides make them incredibly frustrating to take down. Even the most skilled rookies take 30 agonizing minutes to crush just one. But Ju Hyuk is a player now, his eyes burn with fiery determination to claim his first kill. Jon tilts his head, questioning why his master would willingly choose to suffer such a tedious grind. Ju Hyuk confidently marches toward a grub, only to freeze. He just realized something crucial. He does not even have a weapon! He frantically pivots to borrow a blade from Jon. But the massive, grotesque grub suddenly rears up, casting a terrifying shadow over his trembling frame. His courage shatters, and his face turns ghostly pale. Swallowing his pride, he screams for Jon's help. His loyal summon smirks, praising the incredibly wise choice. In a blinding flash of speed, Jon closes the distance. Boom! With a single, devastating strike, the monster's head explodes into absolute mush. Without wasting a single breath, Jon launches himself at the remaining horde. He commands Ju Hyuk to step back and enjoy the show. Twin daggers materialize in his grasp, a vicious thrill dancing in his eyes. With a flick of his wrists, the lethal blades tear through the air, piercing multiple giant grubs in a single, flawless motion. And then, the grand finale. Jon triggers a devastating blade explosion. Every stabbed monster violently erupts into a shower of gore. Ju Hyuk's jaw drops in pure awe. An absolute, effortless instant kill. Ding! The golden victory notification rings out. The first floor mission is successfully cleared, raining down a bountiful reward of 100 glowing magic stones. But that is not all. The system grants him an unprecedented S++ clear rank for the Black Tower of Korea. A dazzling platinum badge materializes in his inventory. He is floating on Cloud 9. This system life is almost illegally easy. Visions of endless wealth and ultimate luxury dance in his head. But little does our rookie know, his insane achievement has just triggered shockwaves across the nation. In various corners of Korea, system screens aggressively pop up. From hardcore rankers grinding in training halls to casual players partying in underground clubs, every single awakened player in South Korea receives the exact same mind-blowing server notification. With the second floor officially unlocked, a brilliant pillar of light engulfs Ju Hyuk. He is instantly teleported out of the Black Tower. It seems automatic return is the standard protocol upon clearing a floor. Unfortunately, the spatial sickness hits him like a freight train once again. Glancing at his smartwatch, he realizes the impossible. That entire raid took barely 5 minutes. Jon gives him a proud nod, praising his master's spectacular performance. Sweating nervously, Ju Hyuk admits he literally just stood there like a statue. But Jon completely agrees. Doing absolutely nothing was the absolute best strategic move. He had read horror stories of rookies collapsing from sheer exhaustion just to beat one grub to death. Yet his experience was an absolute breeze. Eagerly, he examines his freshly looted magic stones. His eyes sparkle as he beholds the genuine article for the very first time. These magic stones are the absolute lifeblood of the modern era, an indispensable resource driving global industries. Sure, the market value has crashed significantly since the chaotic early days of the Tower era, but even now, these beauties fetch around 50,000 won per 100 grams. It has been 2 full decades since the apocalyptic Black Towers mysteriously descended upon nations across the globe. While even ordinary civilians know the basic tower trivia, a platinum badge? That is a legendary artifact completely unheard of in mainstream player knowledge. But who cares about deep tower lore right now? His heart pounds with sheer excitement. He just passively farmed 50,000 won in 3 minutes flat. Meanwhile, his overpowered summon casually plops down to binge-watch a Korean drama. Feeling like a king, Juhyuk orders a feast and invites his loyal partner to dig in. Jon leans in, taking a deep sniff of the savory aroma. He curiously asks if they are having spicy braised pig's trotters. Juhyuk quickly clarifies that he ordered the mild, regular flavor, perfectly remembering Jon's strict anti-spice dietary needs. Yet Jon insists he can smell the demonic heat. Juhyuk deadpans, realizing his legendary killer summon actually possesses a laughable 0% spice tolerance. Pushing aside his spicy fears, Jon happily stuffs his face, gratefully thanking his master for such divine grace. Juhyuk raises an eyebrow, genuinely curious about Jon's peculiar speech pattern. When Jon tilts his head in confusion, Juhyuk points out his habit of using rigid, militaristic slang endings like sumda and imda. A nostalgic glint flashes in Jon's eyes. He casually explains that it is a lingering habit from spending eons with his former summoner. A hilarious realization hits Juhyuk. It is literally like picking up weird habits from a toxic ex-boyfriend. Only in this magical world, it is the dreaded ex-summoner influence. Ever the obedient servant, Jon immediately offers to correct his speech if it offends his new master's ears. But Juhyuk waves it off with a grin. Honestly, the quirky military tone is just too fun to listen to. A wave of supreme confidence washes over Juhyuk. The legendary Black Tower is not a death trap at all. In fact, with his ultimate cheat code, this climb is more than just doable. It is going to be an absolute cakewalk. The very next morning, he proudly drafts up what he calls his alpha male daily routine. It is an absolutely grueling schedule. Slaving away at a convenience store under the sun and grinding at a smoky charcoal grill restaurant by night. But things are different now. He officially crosses out that soul-crushing midday construction labor job. That precious time slot has a brand new purpose. Heading straight home to speedrun tower floors with his ultimate carry, Jon. Without hesitation, he summons his partner, confidently slapping another glowing 5-star rating onto his profile. Juhyuk chuckles, admitting that if the system allowed it, he would smash that 10-star rating in a heartbeat. Hearing his master's high praise, Jon's face lights up with absolute pride and satisfaction. The ultimate duo is ready for round 2. Juhyuk questioned if that tiny satisfaction rating even mattered. Jon's lips curled into a knowing smile, revealing that a higher rating was the golden ticket to massive system benefits. We are talking extended manifestation time, explosive rank boosts, and of course a skyrocketing chance of scoring priority summon calls. The scenery warped as they stepped onto the second floor of the ominous Black Tower. A blue system window flashed, revealing their next target. Annihilate 10 agile, obese grubs. The clock started ticking with a harsh 2-hour limit, showing a miserable 0 out of 10 killed. The penalty for death or surrender? Absolute failure. Juhyuk's eyes widened in shock. These grotesque second-floor monsters were deceptively fast, dodging and weaving with an agility that completely defied their massive bulk. Gripping his weapon, Juhyuk asked for orders. But Jon just chuckled, casually stating there was no need to strategize because this massacre would be over in a mere 3 minutes. The legendary summon confidently declared he would sweep the entire floor in a flash and safely escort his young master back home. Smiling at the sheer confidence, Juhyuk promised a grand feast of fried chicken and cold beer as a reward. Jon's eyes gleamed with gratitude before he vanished, launching himself into a storm of blades to butcher the disgusting grubs. Juhyuk could only watch in absolute awe. It was sheer insanity. In the blink of an eye, the mission complete notification chimed, followed by the golden light of a level up. A hefty 200-gram monostone dropped into his hands, but the real shocker was the glowing message. He had just shattered records with an incredible S++ clear rank for the Korean Black Tower. A dazzling platinum badge materialized before him. Staring at yet another impossible S++ grade, Juhyuk seriously questioned if the notorious tower was glitching out to be this much of a breeze. The clear speed was so ridiculously fast, he realized he could literally farm the tower like a casual morning jog before his daily part-time shift. Dawn broke the next day, and the duo ruthlessly charged into the 3rd floor. The new objective? Slaughter 10 frostbite obese grubs. Jon praised his master for a much smoother teleportation landing. True to his word, the elite summon eradicated the icy beasts in mere minutes, clearing the floor effortlessly. The loot kept getting better, dropping a massive 300-gram mana stone. And once again, that blinding S++ rank illuminated the dark skies of the Korean Black Tower. Another brilliant platinum badge became his. This absolute domination did not stop there, as they obliterated the 4th floor, and then steamrolled straight through the 5th with the exact same terrifying efficiency. Gathering 5 ultra-rare S+ rank platinum badges finally triggered a hidden system milestone. A glorious notification announced a highly exclusive special perk. The reward was a jaw-dropping awakening trait enhancement. Thanks to this god-tier buff, his maximum capacity for simultaneous summons permanently expanded to 2. Checking his glowing status window, Juhyuk admired his new level 6 standing and his upgraded dual summoning slot, even though his current summon catalog remained totally empty. His unique trait skills were neatly listed: targeted summon, random summon, and summon dismissal. His utility skills included a daily tower entry and an exclusive dimensional inventory. However, he still desperately lacked any direct combat abilities of his own. This upgrade meant he could deploy an entire 2-man army. Considering Jon was already a 1-man apocalypse, Juhyuk shuddered at how utterly broken these S++ rewards truly were. As the tower grew more perilous, the battles would inevitably drag out. Having 2 overpowered guardians by his side practically guaranteed his absolute survival. With a grueling 20-day cooldown left on his random summon, he resolved to bide his time. Once the timer hit 0, the 3 of them would become an unstoppable trio. He could just kick back on the VIP bus while his summons tore apart reality itself. With soaring morale, he prepared for tomorrow's brutal ascent to the 6th floor. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the atmosphere was incredibly tense inside the Awakener Management Administration headquarters in Hanamdong, Seoul. 2 high-ranking officials sat stiffly on a leather couch, anxiously awaiting a specific event. One of the men nervously muttered, praying to know if the anomaly would strike in the morning, evening, or dead of night. A sharp-eyed woman in a crisp suit glided over, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She smirked, asking if he was agonizing over the global server alerts again. The man flinched, his face burning crimson as he frantically warned her to stop using her terrifying insight to read his mind like an open book. This flustered executive was team leader Joan Gwangil, and the perceptive woman mocking him was none other than Lee Mina, the feared deputy director of the administration. Gwangil swallowed hard and asked if a new system alert had dropped. Mina's eyes darkened as she confirmed the impossible. The Korean Black Tower's 6th floor had just been cleared with an S+ rank. The tower's global announcement system had been screaming non-stop for days, and every single bloody notification flaunted that god-tier S++ achievement. Sweating bullets, Gwangil deduced the horrifying truth. This was not a guild. Since floors 1 through 5 were conquered in perfect sequence, this was unequivocally the work of a single, monstrous entity. He trembled at the implication. Somewhere out there walked a ghost, an absolute sovereign possessing a heaven-defying talent never before seen in human history. If this freak of nature keeps securing S+ ranks. His panicked whisper was violently cut short by a fist slamming down so hard the mahogany desk nearly shattered. The furious aura belonged to Park Yong-soo, the supreme director of the administration. He roared that until now, the absolute highest clear grade ever achieved in the nation was a pathetic rank A. Humanity did not even know grades beyond A existed, let alone that reaching an S+ clear would trigger a worldwide server broadcast. And in this cutthroat era, foreign superpowers were notoriously greedy for naturalizing top-tier awakeners. Shadows hid a much darker reality, as elite guilds and foreign nations were actively assassinating or kidnapping prime awakeners right under their noses. The director's eyes blazed with desperate urgency. Before America or China could swoop in and steal this legendary rookie, the Korean administration had to uncover their identity at all costs. He barked a strict command: put every single newly awakened player under intense surveillance. Meanwhile, oblivious to the nationwide manhunt, a relaxed Juhyuk set his sights on the 8th floor 2 days later. He hummed a happy tune, thrilled to casually conquer a floor a day without breaking a sweat. Everything up to the 10th floor was just the tutorial phase anyway, making this a total cakewalk. The 8th floor manifested as a toxic, bubbling swamp. A red quest window materialized. Execute 10 Crimson Thorn Frog Warriors. A towering amphibious beast lunged for the kill. But Jon casually unholstered his dagger, transforming into a blur of silver light that mercilessly shredded the frog warriors into ribbons. The sweet chime of the system echoed, confirming the bloodbath was over. Juhyuk grinned as his massive loot materialized, a staggering 800-gram mana stone and 5 ultra-rare tower-exclusive healing potions. To no one's surprise, the skies flashed with his signature S++ rank, and another dazzling platinum badge descended into the hands of the Korean Black Tower's hidden ruler. Jon practically worshipped the ground he walked on, praising his magnificent leadership. But let us be entirely real here. Ju had not lifted a single finger all week. Master, merely crossing the tower's threshold is a monumental feat, Jon insisted. Thanks to your divine presence, climbing these floors has been an absolute breeze. However, the deadly assassin's tone suddenly shifted into something serious. But Master, we must remain vigilant. Beyond the 10th floor, the true nightmare begins. They had just obliterated another floor in a mere 3 minutes. Feeling generous, Ju handed his loyal summon an allowance. Go hit the town, grab some good food, and live a little. Since you still have plenty of manifestation time remaining, Ju added with a stern look, just do me a massive favor, and please do not cause any trouble. To Ju's absolute shock, the bloodthirsty killer shook his head. My duty is by your side, Master. I shall simply watch the magic picture box in the living room. Ju sweat dropped, realizing the system's absolute obedience trait was a little too literal. All right then, Ju sighed. Let us just order some fried chicken instead. The legendary assassin's eyes sparkled with childlike joy. Jon immediately grabbed the phone, carefully ordering the most delicious and strictly non-spicy chicken on the menu. While his deadly servant played delivery boy, Ju pulled up the system interface to check their loot. A rare, tower-exclusive healing potion sat gleaming in the rewards menu. He mentally reserved the lifesaver for Jon. Next, he dumped a glowing pile of magic stones onto his desk, staring intensely at the shimmering crystals. His stash had already reached 3.6 kilograms. If he liquidated these on the black market, he was looking at a sweet payday of 1.88 million. The scent of sweet capitalism filled the air. It was finally time to cash out. Soon enough, the fateful day 10 of their Black Tower conquest dawned. The monumental 10th floor was finally within their grasp. Ju had just dragged himself home from another exhausting shift at his part-time job. Tossing his work uniform aside, he could not help but chuckle at his past self. Initially, he had only planned to test the waters of this deadly labyrinth, yet here he was, conquering a new floor every single day like clockwork. Even yesterday's 9th floor boss, a horrifying man-eating corpse flower, had been a total walk in the park. Passing the stages was one thing, but racking up consecutive S++ clear ratings? That was showering him in unimaginable wealth. He had grown so insanely comfortable, he entirely forgot his loyal companion was once a merciless, blood-drenched assassin who took 3 lives. With a flick of his wrist, he initiated the summoning sequence. Without hesitation, Ju slammed the maximum 5 points into the system. Because of his continuous top ratings, a glowing notification popped up. Jon's manifestation time had permanently increased by a full hour. Ju smirked, realizing the maximum score treatment was paying massive dividends. In response, the fearsome killer dramatically formed a giant heart with his arms, shouting his eternal gratitude. Now, he could support him for 1 more hour. In a flash of blinding light, they crossed into the Black Tower of Korea. A familiar surge of pure energy washed over Ju. The system heavily recalibrated his physical stats, unlocking his innate combat skills to match the tower's escalating difficulty. Reaching the 10th floor tier, the difference was absolutely staggering. The physical recalibration inside the tower was not just a slight buff anymore, it was an evolutionary leap. Limitless vitality coursed through his veins, and a massive core of mana ignited within his lower abdomen. He felt utterly invincible, like an untamable wild stallion ready to trample the heavens. Drunk on this newfound godlike power, Ju cracked his knuckles. Step aside, Jon, he declared with a fearless grin. I am joining the front line today. Jon's eyes widened in sheer panic. Absolutely not, Master. If even a single scratch harmed his liege, Jon swore he would violently smash his own head into the concrete out of shame. But Ju firmly stood his ground, hyped up on his wild stallion energy. Desperate, Jon pleaded, claiming that Ju's majestic cheering and praise from the sidelines were more than enough. Ju aggressively argued for his right to do battle. But when he slowly turned his head, a gigantic, blood-curdling eye stared right back. A monstrous insect boss loomed in the shadows. Every ounce of his wild stallion confidence evaporated instantly. A cold sweat drenched his back. How in the world were normal players fighting these nightmare-inducing freaks? Swallowing his terror, Ju cleared his throat and smoothly adjusted his posture. You know what? Sending 2 mighty warriors to jump a mere bug is a total blow to my human dignity. Jon tilted his head, utterly bewildered by the sudden excuse, assuring him there was no shame to his pride in teamwork. But Ju stubbornly doubled down, insisting his supreme honor just would not allow it. Translation? That 10th floor boss was absolutely terrifying. So, he happily threw his loyal summon straight to the meat grinder while he stayed safe. The colossal praying mantis screeched, launching a lethal scythe attack. Jon's goofy demeanor vanished. With eyes like a predator, he leaped into the air, dashing directly up the beast's razor-sharp exoskeleton. His blades became a blur of silver light. In a dazzling symphony of destruction, Jon carved the gargantuan monster into ribbons. And just like that, the dreaded 10th floor mission was effortlessly completed. The loot rained down, granting him a massive 1 kilogram haul of premium magic stones. The golden system text announced another glorious S+ rank clear, dropping a shiny platinum badge into his palm. Jon landed gracefully, bowing before his master to report their flawless victory. The gates to the 11th floor unlocked before a swirling vortex of energy warped them straight out of the Black Tower. Back in the real world, Ju eagerly calculated his riches. With this massive drop, his stash had exploded to a jaw-dropping total of 5.5 kilograms of magical currency. But the real prize was his badge count. Hitting 5 had unlocked a sweet system perk, and now, as expected, possessing 10 platinum badges meant a phenomenal new reward awaited him. His heart raced with pure anticipation. The system prompt dazzled his eyes. He could copy one absolute skill from his summoned entity. The godly menu unfolded. Blade explosion, shock break, vile ambush, poison dagger, shadow step, disruption, stealth, invisibility, and polymorph. Peeking over his shoulder, the master assassin did not even hesitate. "Master, the choice is obvious," Jon urged. "You must select the shadow step technique without a doubt." Ju raised an eyebrow, overwhelmed by the sheer number of overpowered offensive options. But Jon vehemently shook his head, insisting there was absolutely no room to think about this skill copy. He absolutely had to learn shadow step. When Ju asked for his strategic reasoning, Jon replied with a deadpan expression. "Because it is the ultimate convenient technique for running away. Should disaster ever strike," Jon calmly explained, "you would be able to vanish into the darkness, moving quietly and escaping with absolute unmatched speed." Ju dramatically clutched his chest, profoundly offended by the cowardly suggestion. Did he really look like the kind of pathetic weakling who would abandon everyone just to survive alone? He instantly chose shadow step. After all, he rationally justified to himself, unmatched mobility and fast footwork were genuinely seriously important in high-level tactical warfare. "Footwork is the absolute life of a fight," he muttered, nodding sagely at his own excuse. But a thrilling thought crossed his mind. Would this legendary technique actually work out here in the real world too? He stepped outside his sanctuary to test his newfound power. But to his absolute dismay, nothing happened. Frustration bubbled up within him. Why did the summoning work perfectly, while his actual skill completely failed? This inconsistency was maddening. The sun soon rose on the 11th day of his desperate tower-climbing journey. Mustering his resolve, he dialed the Awakener Management Administration. Taking a deep breath, he officially reported his awakening. The operator's voice burst with congratulatory cheers. They promised immediate government support right at his doorstep. But here was the creepy part. Before he even uttered a single digit of his address, they chillingly confirmed they were already on their way. For an ordinary citizen like him, just making that single call to sell magic stones felt like running a brutal marathon. His life force felt completely drained. Honestly, taking this massive leap of faith was the absolute bravest decision of his 25 years of existence. Meanwhile, right outside his humble apartment, the Awakener administration staff had already arrived. Director Lee sat in the passenger seat, riding alongside Gwangil. Gwangil broke the heavy silence, asking about the mysterious Awakener who contacted them from Daegu yesterday. Her response was cold and analytical. She highly doubted that random person was the true owner of the legendary S+ record. A heavy sigh escaped Gwangil's lips. He seriously started to question if this mythical powerhouse even existed in reality. Suddenly, she dropped a fresh piece of intel. Another awakening request just pinged on their radar. Would he join the investigation? His answer was a resolute yes. In this cutthroat line of work, they had to run themselves ragged while they still could. His eyes burned with unwavering determination. If this new target was the legendary player they sought, he would drag them into their elite squad, even if he had to empty the administration's vault and shower them with unprecedented benefits. Concurrently, completely oblivious to the brewing storm outside, Juhak was peacefully scrubbing his home. Right on cue, the Awakener Management Administration staff arrived at his door. Brushing off his nerves, he opened up and politely invited them inside. The imposing team leader, Zhang Guangjil, formally introduced himself alongside Deputy Director Li Mina. He dropped a crucial detail. Mina was an active player herself, meaning Juhak could ask her absolutely anything. However, having an intimidatingly sharp woman analyzing his living room only cranked his anxiety up to maximum. Suddenly, Mina leaned in uncomfortably close. The sudden invasion of personal space made Juhak's face burn bright red, and in that split second, her sharp instincts flared. She instantly knew he was the one. The legendary S+ ranker Juhak completely lost his cool. He panicked and screamed, throwing his arms up in pure shock before his brain could even process the situation. Then, the absolute weight of her suspicion finally hit him. Cold sweat trickled down his spine. Did these high-ranking officials possess some secret Awakener identification method that he was completely clueless about? His survival instinct screamed at him to deny everything. He desperately tried to act natural, but his own body betrayed him. Stiff as a malfunctioning robot, he awkwardly mumbled that he had heard the rumors, but he was definitely not the guy. It was a textbook display of terrible lying, and those rigid, nervous movements absolutely did not escape Mina's piercing gaze. Guangyil quickly smacked her shoulder, fiercely scolding her for aggressively probing innocent citizens, but Mina smoothly dodged his hand, flashing a mischievous smirk as she declared she would keep digging. Guangyil bowed slightly, apologizing for his partner's sheer audacity. Juhak nervously swallowed, desperately convincing himself it was all just a psychological test. Suddenly, a ridiculously cute chibi character popped onto a screen. It was a tiny, adorable black tower with fluttering wings and a magical star wand. Striking a playful pose, it cheerfully introduced itself as Tabi, the official mascot of the Korea Black Tower. The cheerful mascot began explaining the history of the real tower. A pitch-black, ominous monolith with an overwhelming godlike scale that dwarfed the absolute tallest skyscrapers on planet Earth. 20 years ago, these massive structures materialized across the globe overnight, a cataclysmic event that changed humanity forever. Every single nation panicked. They deployed their elite soldiers and brilliant scientists, but absolutely no one could even take a step near it. It was physically impossible to access, as if heavily guarded by an impenetrable, invisible barrier. The horrifying mystery of what it was only solved when the very first awakened players miraculously emerged. The towering monolith operated like a twisted video game system, a brutal structure where chosen players had to conquer it, fighting floor by bloody floor. On the outside, players looked like average, everyday citizens. But the moment they stepped inside the tower, they awakened godlike abilities and devastating magical skills. They upgraded legendary equipment using divine rewards plundered from the tower's depths. These items quickly became the very foundation of the new global economy. But what would happen if humanity refused to climb? The answer was sheer terror. If a new upper floor was not cleared within a strict 6-month deadline, a grim countdown would begin, and eventually, the tower would violently collapse. This was not just a myth. 3 years ago, that exact nightmare became reality, and the entire city of Mumbai in India was completely erased from the map. It was common knowledge that every nation harbored between 1 to 3 of these cursed black towers. South Korea was burdened with exactly one. It loomed ominously deep within the rugged mountains of Gangwon province. The chosen few who could enter were a microscopic fraction, estimated at a mere 0.01 to 0.02% of the entire population. That meant only a measly 5,000 to 10,000 individuals held the fate of the nation in their hands, an incredibly rare and elite breed. Despite the terrifyingly low numbers, the Korean Black Tower subjugation was blazing forward. With the 65th floor gloriously cleared, they boasted the second highest global record, trailing only slightly behind the United States' 66th floor. The citizens slept peacefully at night, knowing they had nothing to fear. Their society was protected by legendary heroes, proudly known as players. Just as ancient explorers once conquered uncharted continents, modern humanity was bravely pioneering and decoding the deadly mysteries of the Black Tower. The awakened were the dazzling hope of this new era. The video enthusiastically urged everyone to register as an official player, promising that they too could become a legendary hero. The cheerful educational video finally ended. Now, Guangyil's expression turned dead serious. It was time for the real interrogation and some crucial verifications. His voice carried heavy authority as he directly asked if Juhak was truly awakened. Juhak firmly nodded yes, revealing that he had already stepped inside the tower and casually cleared some floors. To prove his claim, he proudly displayed his harvested magic stones. But when Guangyil asked exactly how high he had climbed, Juhak casually dropped a bombshell. He had reached floor 10. Guangyil and Mina shared a sharp, subtle glance. The air in the room suddenly grew intensely heavy. Floor 10. That was the exact same floor where the legendary S+ record was just forged. Mina's predatory instincts went into overdrive. Her eyes narrowed with intense suspicion. Testing the waters, she directly asked if he had heard about the explosive recent event known as the Global Notice. Juhak desperately tried to maintain his poker face. Sweating internally, he smoothly lied that he heard the rumors too, but had absolutely no clue who triggered it. Throwing in a nervous chuckle, he casually added that the mysterious guy sure sounded like an amazing player. Watching his rigid posture, Guangyil offered a reassuring smile. There is absolutely no need to be tense, he said. But behind that professional facade, the agents wondered if this was merely stage fright. The seeds of suspicion had already been planted in their minds. Pushing their lingering doubts aside for now, they proceeded to lay out the official contract terms. The Awakened Association operates on a strict 2-tier system. Players are classified into 2 distinct factions, the prestigious Elite Vanguard and the Independent General Climbing Division. Those in the General Division dictate their own fate. They plan and execute their own raid schedules, operating essentially as superpowered freelancers in the tower. The Elite Vanguard, however, is a completely different story. They operate directly under the thumb of the Awakener Management Bureau, bound by unbreakable ties to the government. They are burdened with the heavy duty of clearing the upper floors. In exchange for risking their lives, they are showered with VIP benefits and unlimited administrative support. The absolute greatest perk of all? Personal physical protection in the real world. Because once they step outside the tower's magical domain, even the strongest players revert to vulnerable mortals. On top of that unparalleled security, joining the elites guarantees a massive, guaranteed annual salary. It was an offer most awakened would kill for. But Ju Hyuk's mind was playing out a completely different, terrifying scenario. He imagined the sheer chaos that would erupt if the world discovered he was the legendary S+ record holder. The paparazzi would swarm him like bloodthirsty locusts. They would relentlessly broadcast his life as a wealthy loner in Hanamdong. He would honestly rather face a boss monster than endure that suffocating spotlight. Gwang Il then dropped the final, crucial condition. If you join the elites, he explained, every single raid must be recorded using our official, government-issued body cameras. The agents waited for his eager acceptance. But to their absolute shock, Ju Hyuk flatly rejected the elite division. He declared he was perfectly content remaining a general climber. Gwang Il's jaw practically dropped. Why on earth would anyone refuse such heaven-defying conditions? Playing his part perfectly, Ju Hyuk lowered his gaze. I lack the talent, he mumbled, and honestly, I am terrified. He claimed that safely farming the lower floors for modest rewards was all he ever wanted. Gwang Il desperately urged him to sleep on it and think it over. But Ju Hyuk's fake timidness was an unbreakable fortress. His decision was final, and the door was firmly shut. Beside him, Mina let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Another dead end, she thought bitterly. The lower floors were full of pathetic scavengers who hit a wall and settled for safe farming. But to hear someone shamelessly confess their cowardice during an official evaluation? That was a first. In her eyes, a spineless mindset like that completely disqualified him as a player. Even if he had begged on his knees to join the elites, she firmly believed a coward of his caliber should be blacklisted immediately. The core philosophy of the elite vanguard was an unbreakable will to ascend. Hiding her overwhelming disdain, she professionally accepted his pathetic choice. With the paperwork settled, Gwang Il made one final request. It was time for him to physically enter the tower. This was the ultimate, undeniable procedure to confirm a true awakening. Since your single daily entry would be wasted otherwise, Gwang Il suggested, why not clear a few monsters while you are inside? But Ju Hyuk's sharp instincts immediately caught on to the trap. This was a cleverly disguised probe. They were relentlessly testing him, still trying to unmask him as the S+ anomaly. Playing along, he agreed to initiate a raid. But he threw in a calculated warning. I am extremely slow, he lied. I usually drain the entire time limit, so expect a 2-hour wait. The agent simply nodded, accepting the tedious delay as part of the job. Mina offered a polite, hollow smile, telling him to take all the time he needed without feeling pressured. With a steady breath, Ju Hyuk readied his mind for the transition. Feel free to watch TV and grab some drinks from the fridge, he casually tossed over his shoulder. I might be in there for quite a while. And with a flash of brilliant light, his figure vanished from the room. Staring at the empty space left by the teleportation, Gwang Il finally nodded. Well, his awakening is absolutely genuine. What is your read on him, Mina? She crossed her arms, her expression completely unamused. His combat talent remains a mystery, she stated coldly. But his sheer, suffocating timidity? That was painfully obvious. Every word, every gesture reeked of a weak mindset. I fully expect him to surrender on the 11th floor. When Gwang Il asked why, she shivered slightly. I have survived the 11th floor myself. It is a brutal test of pure primal fear. Gwang Il's eyes widened in sudden realization. Are you talking about the long-tailed tunnel centipedes? Exactly, she replied grimly. Their combat strength is pathetic, but a player must slaughter 100 of those grotesque, nightmarish abominations. She scoffed. A coward like him? He would paralyze at the mere sight of them. She would bet her life that he would flee straight to the safe zone and hit the abandon button. Gwang Il remained silent. He knew better than to doubt Mina's razor-sharp intuition. With a heavy sigh, Gwang Il reached for his phone. He might as well report the disappointing news to the director right now. It seemed they had chased another useless phantom. Meanwhile, deep within the dark confines of the tower's 11th floor, Ju Hyuk's shadow twisted as he called forth his loyal summon, John. The ethereal being knelt instantly. I am honored by your call, my liege. A blue system window flickered into existence. The objective? Annihilate 100 long-tailed tunnel centipedes within 3 agonizing hours. Current progress stood at 0 out of 100. The penalty for death or retreat was absolute failure. Ju Hyuk stared into the sprawling cavern, his face twisting in pure disgust. The grotesque chittering echoed in the darkness. Slaying one was sickening enough, let alone an entire 100 of them. Sensing his master's discomfort, Jon rose to his feet. I shall eradicate this filth immediately, my lord. Give me but 5 minutes to cleanse this entire cavern. No, wait, Juhyuk quickly intervened. You need to hunt as painfully slow as humanly possible. Drag this out for over an hour. A fast clear would trigger another flashing S+ record on the global boards. He explained the dangerous game of cat and mouse he was playing with the agents outside. I will also recall you before I exit the tower, he ordered. Jon bowed his head in perfect understanding of his master's grand deception. Just entering the tower was enough to prove his awakening. Yet, the agents had cunningly pushed for a full raid. Juhyuk's brilliant counter-strategy was to artificially tank his own clear time. With a miserably slow record, he would completely slip out of their S+ dragnet. With his orders received, Jon unleashed his aura and began the slaughter, but the monstrous centipedes were being vaporized in mere seconds. Too fast, Juhyuk hissed in panic. I said, hold back your power! Jon immediately restrained his overwhelming godlike strength. The pace of destruction slowed to a sluggish, tedious crawl. Watching the agonizingly slow hunt, Juhyuk finally nodded in satisfaction. This sluggish pace would perfectly sell his cowardly disguise, but in the depths of the tower, complacency is deadly. Without warning, the cavern floor violently ruptured beneath his feet. A massive horror erupted from the earth, throwing Juhyuk completely off balance. A vile swarm of centipedes instantly cascaded toward him like a tidal wave of nightmares. He desperately tried to activate an evasion skill, but panic struck, and his frozen muscles simply refused to obey. Jon's eyes flared with unprecedented terror at the sight of his master in peril. In a fraction of a second, he crossed the cavern, obliterating the vile creatures threatening his liege. Unimaginable fury radiated from the summon. How dare these wretched insects target the Supreme Master? In a spectacular burst of power, Jon eradicated the entire swarm simultaneously. The cavern fell dead silent, but Juhyuk merely sighed, watching the kill count skyrocket. Jon, he groaned, rubbing his temples. I told you. You have to kill them slowly. Juhyuk practically begged his summon to take it easy. But Jon? He was fighting for his life and refused to hold back. Our main character could only watch in despair, wishing his minion was not such an overachiever. Ding! The glowing blue system window shattered the silence. The 11th floor had been cleared. The grade? A flawless S+, accompanied by a dazzling platinum badge. Access to the 12th floor was officially granted. But as the teleportation light swallowed him, Juhyuk stared into the void with completely dead, fish-like eyes. He was not amused. Outside, 5 agonizing minutes had passed. Mina checked her watch, assuming the rookie had given up and failed. But then, a massive world notice flashed across the sky. The broadcast echoed for all to see. Black Tower, Korea, 11th floor cleared, grade S+. And right on cue, Juhyuk materialized from the portal. Mina's jaw hit the floor. She was absolutely speechless. Seeing her frozen like a statue, Gwangil tilted his head and asked what was wrong. Trembling, she pointed out the impossible. The very second Juhyuk stepped out, the S+ notification had triggered. But wait, something felt off. Our overpowered rookie looked entirely too grim. Darkness clouded Juhyuk's eyes. He muttered under his breath, cursing his rotten luck. Looming menacingly with his summon at his back, Juhyuk's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You two will have to be silenced. He commanded Jon to tie them up quickly. But the ruthless summon took it a step further. Flash! In a spray of crimson, he chopped their heads clean off. Juhyuk let out a blood-curdling scream. Pure panic washed over him as he grabbed his head. You lunatic! Who gave you the order to execute them? The severed heads, bizarrely wrapped in neat little ribbons, started calling out his name. Juhyuk fell to his knees, pleading for forgiveness, until he blinked. It was all just a horrifying hallucination. Snap back to reality. The 3 of them were just sitting quietly across from each other. Juhyuk was drenched in a frantic cold sweat. His mind had been playing terrifying, murderous tricks on him. Coughing awkwardly, he forcefully reeled in his sanity. Completely oblivious to the mental breakdown that just happened, Gwangjo leaned in. Their elite strike force absolutely needed a monster talent like him. A painfully stiff smile plastered itself onto Juhyuk's face. Sweating bullets, he started rambling at light speed. He desperately spun a web of excuses, praying they would write this off as a giant misunderstanding. Waving his hands frantically, he pitched his best lie. The system message? Oh, that was definitely just a glitch. Another top-tier player must have cleared the 11th floor at the exact same time. Gwangil's gaze sharpened. He was not buying it. The timing of the portal and the broadcast? Far too perfect to be a mere coincidence. But Juhyuk doubled down, practically swearing on his life that he was innocent. Gwangil gave him one last piercing stare. Are you absolutely sure it was not you? Juhyuk nodded vigorously. Yes, absolutely not me. Sighing in defeat, Guangel finally backed off. Fine. Since his awakening was officially verified anyway, it was time to draw up the paperwork. But when the document slid across the table, Juhyuk froze. He had specifically begged for a basic, low-profile general contract. So why was the word elite practically glowing at the top? Guangil puffed out his chest with absolute pride. This was not your average agreement. It was a different dimension of wealth. The sole ultra-elite contract in the entire industry, custom-tailored for a rising god. The terms were mind-blowing. A base salary of 12 billion won, luxury real estate included, VVIP status wherever he went, backed by an army of elite security personnel. And the ultimate trump card? Complete legal immunity. With this level of clearance, a player practically sat on a throne high above the law itself. Juhyuk's eyes widened in sheer horror. This was not a job offer. It was a coronation. Guangil casually dropped the bomb that only one other person possessed this privilege. Korea's undisputed #1 player, Yu Chulin. Pushing the golden ticket closer, the bureau agent urged him to read the fine print. It contained every single heaven-defying perk the nation could possibly bestow. Slap! Juhyuk pushed the paper back. A hard, undeniable no. If they were not going to give him a completely average, forgettable general contract, he would walk away from being a player forever. Guangil looked like he had been struck by lightning. Why in the world would anyone reject this paradise? Juhyuk's answer was tragically simple. He despised being in the spotlight. Attention breeds expectations. Expectations breed burdens. And burdens? They lead to a soul-crushing mountain of stress that his fragile heart simply refused to carry. The bureau officials exchanged bewildered glances. They were dealing with an ultra-rare, supreme-grade introvert. Besides, sure, tower climbing was kind of fun, but he was only on floor 11. The future was a dark, scary mystery he wanted no part of. Reading the absolute dread in the young man's eyes, Guangil tactically retreated. Pushing him now would only make this golden goose fly away forever. With a heavy sigh of defeat, the agent finally caved. They would proceed with the boring, painfully normal general contract. Juhyuk knew exactly what the rest of the world would think. They would call him insane. Why not just stamp the paper, swim in billions, and flex your way up the tower like a boss? But power comes at a terrible price. An ultra-elite contract meant ultra-elite responsibilities. A chain wrapped in gold is still a chain. The moment you sign, you forfeit your freedom. Want to quit? Too bad. You are drafted into the frontline suicide squads pushing the nightmare tier upper floors. And our boy wanted absolutely nothing to do with that hellish destiny. All he wanted was peace. As long as he could eat well, sleep soundly, and make a comfortable living, that was his ultimate happy ending. Meanwhile, at the prestigious Seoul Hanam-dong Awakening Management Bureau, a storm was brewing. Director Park glared at the final files, completely baffled by the massive contradiction from the earlier reports. Guangil stood at attention, delivering the ridiculous truth. Juhyuk was a frightful coward with zero ambition to climb. The director's eye twitched. This quivering mess was their legendary S+ rank achiever? Guangil solemnly nodded. Yes, sir. The director rubbed his temples, a massive headache forming. It made absolutely zero sense. He had to admit, they had stumbled upon the most bizarre anomaly in the history of awakened beings. A player wielding god-tier power, yet cursed with the backbone of a jellyfish. Director Park demanded to know if they had simply grabbed the wrong guy. But Mina stepped up, shutting down that theory. Impossible. The data was flawless. The clearing time and his exit synced to the millisecond. The director slammed his fist on the desk. Coward or not, raw talent of this magnitude could not be ignored. His eyes burned with fierce determination. Do whatever it takes. Bribe him, trick him, or drag him kicking and screaming. Put that boy on the elite team. Guangil bowed deeply, accepting the impossible mission. Meanwhile, our reluctant hero was absolutely fuming. He had narrowly escaped the spotlight, and now he was aggressively lecturing his bloodthirsty summon. Putting on a terrifying front was exhausting work for an introvert. Panting heavily, Juhyuk pointed a shaking finger at Jon. If you wipe a floor out instantly one more time, I will show you zero mercy. Flash! The frosty winds of the 12th floor howled around them. A new system quest appeared. Eliminate 20 ice snow icicle spear weasels. Time limit? A generous 3 hours. Calling forth his demonic minion once more, Juhyuk grabbed his shoulders and practically begged him. Go, absolutely. Slow, take your time. Jon gave a frighteningly cheerful nod, giving Juhyuk a false glimmer of hope. Maybe his minion finally understood. If they could just pretend to be aggressively average from now on, the Bureau would finally leave him alone in peace. But the frozen wasteland of this floor was absolutely brutal. He had layered up, but the biting frost pierced straight to his bones. He gritted his teeth to endure it, but his pale complexion did not escape Jon's sharp eyes. The loyal knight practically panicked, asking if his liege was all right. Our main character brushed it off, claiming he could handle the chill. But Jon was taking no chances. He immediately vowed to annihilate every monster in sight, promising to escort his master back to a warm hearth in record time. Our main character opened his mouth to tell him to take it easy, but it was too late. Jon had already vanished into a blur of deadly motion. In Jon's overly dramatic mind, catching a mere cold was a fatal, incurable curse. To him, his master's life was already dangling by a thread. Fueled by sheer desperation, Jon slaughtered the beasts with terrifying speed and precision. Suddenly, a blue system window chimed in. He had unlocked a special perk for gathering 15 platinum badges. The reward was a high-grade artifact called the Energy Shield Kit. In a flash of light, it dropped straight into his spatial inventory. Our main character wasted no time snapping the sleek bracelet onto his wrist. This was not just jewelry. It was a lifesaver that generated a powerful barrier to absorb incoming attacks. Once its damage threshold is shattered, the shield goes on a strict 5-hour cooldown. But the best part? Its defensive power scales endlessly with his player level. A shimmering, translucent barrier slowly wrapped around his body like invisible armor. And since it lacked the tower-exclusive restriction, he could unleash this absolute defense back in the real world too. Naturally, his capitalist mindset kicked into overdrive. Just how much cash could this bad boy fetch on the black market? Doing the quick math in his head, he figured a top-tier defensive artifact like this could easily auction for 2 to 3 billion won. For a fleeting second, he actually considered selling it and retiring to a life of absolute luxury. But his gamer instincts kicked in. If the 15th floor dropped loot this incredible, what godly treasures awaited him higher up? Thrilled by the endless possibilities, he eagerly asked Jon if they could steamroll the 16th floor right now and snag another S+ rank. Jon confidently stated that clearing the floor was a breeze. However, guaranteeing a flawless S+ rating was a different story entirely. Juyuk blinked, completely caught off guard by his knight's sudden hesitation. His grand plans came to a screeching halt. Meanwhile, Jon, casually munching on a handful of cookies, tilted his head and innocently asked if something was troubling his liege. The gears in Juyuk's head turned as he reconsidered his early retirement plan. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Director Park was pacing a hole in the floor. The earth-shattering system announcements for S+ clears had gone dead silent. Mina adjusted her glasses, her voice tense as she reported that exactly 15 days had passed without a single update. Gwangil chimed in, revealing that their intelligence tracked the mysterious player deadlocking on the 15th floor. Hearing this, Director Park absolutely blew his top. He slammed his fists down, cursing the heavens for bestowing such legendary, heaven-defying talent upon a player with no backbone. Gwangil tried to play peacemaker. He pointed out that the tower's difficulty spikes dramatically from the 16th floor onward, but he firmly refused to believe Juyuk had thrown in the towel. He urged the director to have a little more faith. Right on cue, his smart device buzzed. It was a direct message from the man of the hour himself. The message stated that Juyuk was heading straight to the Awakener Management Administration to access the exclusive player shop. Suddenly, it all clicked into place for Director Park. The truth struck him like lightning. He realized the absolute madman was not stuck at all. He was purposely farming the 15th floor to stockpile capital for high-tier gear. Gwangil nodded in agreement. It made perfect sense. After all, when they first visited Juyuk to verify his awakening, the poor guy did not have a single piece of armor to his name. He was literally a bare-handed newbie. Guilt crashed over Director Park like a tidal wave. He realized how utterly foolish he had been to doubt a genius player without knowing his grand strategy. Desperate to make amends, he immediately barked an order. The moment Juyuk stepped through their doors, every top-tier item was to be sold to him at absolute rock-bottom giveaway prices. He deeply regretted his impatience from 15 days ago. Back inside the frozen tower, the color completely drained from Jon's face. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as he processed his master's insane command. Juyuk had just ordered his loyal knight to stab him with a dagger. To Jon, this order was pure psychological torture. Falling to his knees, he begged his master to just beat him to a pulp instead of forcing him to commit such extreme treason. Juyuk let out a heavy sigh, trying to explain that this was merely a field test to see if the new energy shield actually absorbed fatal damage. He was not asking for an execution. Our main character honestly could not fathom why his overpowered summon was acting like a drama queen over a tiny scratch. But Jon stubbornly squeezed his eyes shut, aggressively ignoring the command. Fed up with the melodramatic display, our main character decided to take matters into his own hands. He forcefully yanked Jon's arm forward, driving the sharp blade right into his own side. Jon watched in absolute horror as crimson blood spilled. Only then did Juyuk's brain freeze. He completely forgot to turn the shield on. Absolute chaos erupted. Jon shrieked in despair, begging his master to sever his cursed, treasonous arm. Luckily, the system's passive healing factor kicked in just in time to close the wound. With tears in his eyes, Jon pleaded with his liege to never pull a stunt like that again. Feeling slightly embarrassed, Juyuk coughed awkwardly and ordered Jon to get back to farming. Swishing into action, Jon blurred across the snowy landscape, his blades mercilessly reaping the lives of monsters lurking in the towering branches. Juyuk watched the massacre, estimating that the entire zone would be wiped clean in 10 minutes flat. With time to kill, he decided to test out his newly acquired abilities. He activated the Shadow Step skill, and his jaw hit the floor. His body rocketed forward with explosive momentum, leaving behind a fading afterimage in the snow. The sheer velocity was mind-blowing. The sensation of cutting through the wind was exhilarating. Now it made perfect sense why his loyal knight insisted he master this footwork technique before anything else. The absolute freedom of movement was god tier. It was the ultimate, foolproof skill for running away from a deadly fight. But right as he praised his escape plan, a rustling sound caught his attention. A vile goblin emerged from the frost. The wretched creature was desperately crawling through the snow. It had clearly been cowering in fear of Jon's absolute slaughter, but sensing a weaker target, the monster suddenly launched a vicious ambush against our main character. Instinct took over. He triggered his artifact instantly. A pulse of blue energy surged out just in the nick of time, stopping the beast's foul jaws from snapping his arm in half. Disgusted by the close call, he delivered a devastating kick, launching the goblin through the air like a soccer ball. It sailed directly into Jon's line of sight, who instantly sliced it into ribbons with a beautiful mid-air execution. Jon landed gracefully, ready to make a witty comment about his master's perfect assist. But then his blood ran cold. Realizing his liege had been attacked, he abandoned everything and bolted over like a madman. Frantic with worry, Jon began furiously inspecting every inch of his master's body. He fired off 100 questions a second, terrified that the filthy goblin had somehow harmed his precious liege. After a thorough, almost bizarre inspection, which even included sniffing his armpits, the verdict was undeniable. Juyuk was completely, unbelievably unharmed. A storm of scolding immediately followed. He chewed Juyuk out for his reckless stunt, warning him against such suicidal bravery. With his ears practically bleeding from the lecture, Juyuk meekly promised to behave. Fast forward through 15 grueling days grinding away on the 15th floor. His combat senses had sharply evolved, and his skills now flowed like second nature. The harvest was spectacular. 22.5 kilograms of raw magic stones, boasting a staggering market value of 11,250,000 won. The moment Juyuk called to visit the player shop, team leader Gwanggil was on the line. His response was immediate. A premium escort was already en route to Juyuk's door. Juyuk tried to wave off the special treatment, claiming he could just take the bus. But Gwanggil smoothly deflected, insisting it was merely a basic perk for their contracted awakeners. Defeated by the corporate politeness, Juyuk simply waited. Moments later, a sleek, jaw-dropping luxury sedan arrived to whisk him away in ultimate style. The second his foot hit the pavement, Gwanggil was there with a blindingly warm smile. The grand welcome to the administration building made Juyuk painfully aware of his Ultra V IP status. They stepped into the high-tech facility, where the system swiftly scanned and registered his unique, mana-infused vein data. His new clearance granted him absolute freedom. He could now access the premium shop whenever he pleased. Gwanggil eagerly offered a personal grand tour, but Juyuk politely shot the idea down. He just wanted to browse in peace, far away from suffocating attention. But stepping into the breathtakingly luxurious player shop, an eerie silence greeted him. There was not a single other awakener in sight. Were the prices here just too astronomical for normal players? Pushing the thought aside, he focused on his primary mission, liquidating his mountain of magic stones. The system calculated a massive payday, 11,250,000 won, slated to hit his bank account in exactly 3 business days. Needing gear now, he requested an immediate credit advance. The approval was granted instantly. Drained from the day's events, he decided to quickly grab his gear and retreat to his sanctuary. Meanwhile, deep within the executive offices, Director Park turned to Gwanggil, checking if their golden goose was shopping comfortably. Gwanggil reported with a sly grin. Our VIP is currently browsing in absolute peace. We declared an emergency closure, kicking every other player out for the entire day. The director nodded, probing about the price tags. Gwanggil's solution was delightfully absurd. He had secretly ordered the staff to slash every single price by a staggering 90%. His reasoning was purely psychological. Handing out free legendary gear would trigger the humble boy's alarms, causing him to run away entirely. The illusion of a bargain was the perfect trap. Director Park smirked, praising the flawless execution. Cut back to Juyuk's humble apartment. He proudly unveiled his new adamant mace, scored for a mere 2 million won. Beside it sat his crown jewel. A slick pair of basilisk leather walkers, snagged for an unbelievable 3 million won. Wait a minute. Standard gear in this tier usually started at 20 to 30 million, minimum. Recalling team leader Gwanggil's overly attentive service, it finally clicked. He was definitely being spoon-fed. A heavy sigh escaped his lips. This kind of blatant favoritism felt incredibly suffocating. But looking down at those insanely cool basilisk boots, his gamer heart fluttered, leaving him completely torn. The only reason he could dive into the dungeon wearing absolutely nothing but stylish boots for defense was the overwhelming power of his energy shield. This ultimate, all-in-one invisible armor completely eliminated the need for bulky defensive gear. And it was all thanks to his god-tier system perk. When he first stepped foot into the tower, he swore a solemn oath to play it safe and stay humble. But this overpowered perk? It was like a devil whispering sweet temptations into his ear. It was slowly but surely awakening a ravenous greed within his soul. The very next morning, the summoning circle flared to life. Jon materialized onto the scene. Offering a crisp military salute, Jon eagerly asked if it was time to grind the 15th floor again, but Juyuk's eyes gleamed with ambition. No, today they were breaching the 16th floor. The system chimes rang out. His summon cooldown had completely reset, granting him one more slot for a companion. As he triggered the skill, Juyuk prayed to the heavens with everything he had. A majestic, brilliant purple light exploded in the center of the room, but the awe quickly faded into sheer panic. The silhouette forming inside the light was impossibly huge. Crash! The towering figure's head literally smashed right through the ceiling. Juyuk stood absolutely paralyzed, ice water replacing the blood in his veins. His pupils dilated in pure, unfocused horror. Cold sweat cascaded down his face as his jaw hit the floor. What in the name of the system? What kind of apocalyptic boss monster had he just dragged into his living room? But beneath the mortal terror, a completely different tragedy struck. His poor, innocent security deposit, every crack in that ceiling meant kissing his hard-earned cash goodbye. The blinding light finally faded, revealing limbs as thick as ancient tree trunks. It was a colossal, mountain-like man. Though honestly, Juyuk could not tell if this behemoth was human or a pure-blood beast. Suddenly, Jon clicked his tongue in extreme annoyance. He launched himself into the air with a furious shout, planting a devastating flying kick, right square into the giant's massive face, forcing him to the ground. Raining blows down upon the towering titan, Jon threw an absolute tantrum. Out of all the legendary souls across the dimensions, why did it have to be this exact meathead? He screamed that this giant was the bane of his existence and deserved to die. Juyuk watched the chaos unfold, utterly bewildered. Did these two have some kind of past life beef? Meanwhile, the colossal man just swatted at Jon like a fly, grumbling that those punches did not hurt a bit. They barely even tickled his monstrous defense. That triggered Jon's absolute fury. He dared the giant to say one more word, viciously threatening to slice his massive throat open and tie the remaining skin into a neat little decorative ribbon. Enough was enough. Juyuk finally snapped out of his daze and intervened. He roared that one destroyed ceiling was plenty of property damage for today. Hearing his master's command, Jon instantly snapped to attention. Juyuk ordered his knight to back off, needing to properly interrogate their newest party member. But Jon just scoffed in disgust. He warned his master that trying to communicate with this thing was a total waste of breath. Back in their home dimension, this behemoth was a living legend, infamous for having rocks for brains. Jon sneered, betting his sword that this musclehead did not even know the absolute 3 laws of summoning. The giant's pride was wounded. He stubbornly barked back that he had perfectly memorized every single rule. Jon crossed his arms, wearing a wicked smirk. Fine then, prove it. Recite them right now. The titan cleared his throat, rumbling like an earthquake. Article 1, absolute unquestioning obedience to the summoner. Article 2, always prioritize the core values of the mission. And for Article 3, the giant froze, his massive brain completely stalling out. He could not remember a single word. Jon threw his hands up in triumph. Case closed. He eagerly begged Juyuk to let him slaughter the idiot, triggering a 100-day banishment penalty. Steam was literally pouring out of the poor giant's ears as he strained to remember the final rule. Meanwhile, Juyuk just stood there blinking in confusion. Wait, a 100-day unsummonable death penalty? That was a system feature? Right on cue, a glowing blue system window materialized in the air. It mercilessly revealed the giant's true class title, the dim-witted savage meat shield of the Great Plains tribe. His name was lost to time. His pull grade? A pathetic rare. He was classified as a human savage warrior, available for a mere 10-hour summon, followed by an agonizing 3-hour cooldown. Staring at the 0% satisfaction rating hovering over the giant, Juyuk let out a heavy sigh of bitter disappointment. An R rank was the absolute rock bottom of the gacha pool. He seriously debated ignoring the giant and waiting a whole month for his next summoning ticket. Hoping for a miracle, he asked the hulking figure for his name, but the man stared blankly, his memory completely wiped. Where was he? No clue. What was the tower? Not a single thought behind those eyes. Frustration bubbled up inside our main character. With a desperate groan, he opened the system interface to check the warrior's hidden specs. But then, without warning, flash. Just like his experience with Jon, Juyuk was forcefully dragged into the summon's past, awakening beneath the endless sky of a lush green plain. In this memory, the terrifying savage was just a gentle giant, blissfully chasing butterflies. He was a pure-hearted child of the Great Plains tribe, finding absolute joy in the simple embrace of nature. Yet, hidden beneath that childlike innocence, slumbered a monstrous, top-tier physical prowess. When towering plains wolves bared their fangs and lunged at him, the giant simply thought it was a game of tag. With an innocent giggle, he accidentally shattered their bones into dust. The tragedy was, he was simply too pure, too incredibly dense. Eventually, a cunning opportunist tracked him down, eyes gleaming as he confirmed the terrifying rumors of the gentle titan. The man, completely dwarfed by the warrior's shadow, introduced himself as Aras. He asked the giant for his name, but the innocent soul had long forgotten it. What followed was pure heartbreak. Deceived by this so-called false hero, the savage was dragged onto a blood-soaked battlefield, used as a disposable human shield against an apocalyptic superbeast, the Hydra. Relying solely on his diamond-hard flesh, the giant face-tanked the Hydra's devastating acidic breath, roaring as he pushed forward. With bare hands, he ripped the monster's heads off one by one, completely oblivious to the fact that his own skin was violently melting off his bones. His only driving thought? Protect my comrades. But even a titan falls. The relentless showers of venomous acid finally overwhelmed his mighty frame, dissolving him into death. And his final reward? The very comrades he died to protect stood in a circle, ruthlessly mocking his charred remains. The memory shattered. Juyuk clenched his fists, tears hot on his cheeks. Now he knew why the system labeled him a literal meat shield. The sheer cruelty of the giant's past twisted his heart. He didn't care if this warrior was a bit slow on the uptake. Juyuk stepped forward, extending a warm hand of true fellowship. He invited him to climb the tower, promising they would do it together. The giant blinked, then slowly reached out, but his massive, battle-scarred hand easily dwarfed Juyuk's. In a comical yet touching moment, Juyuk found himself shaking just a single one of the giant's thick fingers. Deciding the big guy needed an identity, Juyuk tossed out names like Yaman and Gobang. The giant scratched his head in utter confusion, so Juyuk gently nudged him to trust his own heart and choose. With a booming, goofy laugh, the giant pointed to the name Gobang. Looking up at his new colossal friend, Juyuk made a solemn vow. He promised Gobang he would give him the happy life he was violently denied. "Do you trust me?" Juyuk asked. Gobang nodded enthusiastically, swearing to follow the summoner's every command with absolute loyalty. Turning to his other chaotic summon, Juyuk declared that the three of them were a team now, and they had to make this bizarre, dynamic work. Jon scoffed with an expression of pure disgust, but behind those dead eyes, the edgy assassin was already plotting. With a twisted smirk, Jon agreed, claiming Gobang would make an excellent disposable meat shield and promised to beat some actual combat sense into the giant's thick skull. With the chaotic party officially formed, Juyuk pointed his gaze upward. It was time to raid the 16th floor. "Yes, sir," Gobang bellowed, his voice rattling the walls. "Whack!" Jon immediately stomped on the giant's foot, viciously scolding him for responding a second too late. Like a massive parrot, Gobang flawlessly mimicked Jon's aggressive tone, sending the assassin into a seething rage. Juyuk just sighed. His party was a mess. A weak-kneed master, a psychotic assassin, and a ridiculously dense titan. If you looked at their stats on paper, it wasn't just a red flag, it was a one-way ticket to a spectacular game over. They stepped through the portal, materializing inside the 16th floor of the Korea Black Tower. The system immediately synced their physical stats to the current level cap, unlocking their deadly traits and combat skills. Juyuk prayed to whatever gods were listening that they would survive. A system window flashed red, mission, annihilate 30 goblin scouts within 5 hours. Jon's murderous aura flared. He ordered Juyuk to throw up his energy shield instantly, warning the amateur to keep his finger on the shadow step trigger. "These filthy green runts use paralyzing blow darts," Jon hissed, and there was no telling when an ambush would strike from the darkness. Swish. A lethal, venom-laced needle sliced through the air straight for Juyuk's neck. But in a blur of motion, Jon snatched the deadly projectile barehanded. The ambush had begun. Heart hammering in his chest, Juyuk frantically dodged behind a massive boulder, while Jon deflected a torrential rain of toxic darts with blinding speed. Thwack! Thwack! The sheer volume of incoming needles was terrifying. The giant rock Juyuk used for cover was actually cracking under the pressure. His desperate eyes scanned the shadows. There had to be over 50 goblins out there. Out of options, Juyuk screamed the command. "Gobang! Take the vanguard!" The gentle giant's goofy smile vanished. As he charged, every single footstep registered like a localized earthquake. The titan bent his knees and launched himself into the stratosphere. Down below, Jon blinked in utter confusion as the goblin horde suddenly broke cover, shrieking in pure terror. A colossal shadow eclipsed the sun, forcing the assassin to look up at the falling meteor. Kaboom! Gobang slammed into the earth with the force of a tactical missile. A devastating shockwave ripped through the battlefield, instantly vaporizing the front line of screaming goblins. The sheer kinetic impact was so violently absurd that even the veteran assassin Jon was sent flying through the air. Peeking from his ruined cover, Juyuk's jaw hit the floor. With that kind of godlike mass and raw power, this wasn't a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. Panicking, the surviving scouts fired a desperate volley of poison needles, but the toxic darts simply bounced off Gobang's steel-like skin as if they were mosquito bites. Obeying his master's order to the letter, the Titan proceeded to steamroll the remaining trash mobs into green paste. Juyuk watched the utter devastation in absolute awe. How in the world was this walking natural disaster only an R rank? If you looked purely at his apocalyptic combat output, this guy was easily an ultra-rare SSR-tier juggernaut. Reality hit him. The system had severely penalized the giant's rank solely because of his single-digit IQ. Later that evening, the victorious trio gathered back at the safe house for a legendary feast of Korean fried chicken. Gobang was in absolute heaven. Beaming with pride, Juyuk praised his colossal MVP, telling the big guy to devour the entire mountain of chicken if he wanted. But Jon immediately smacked the back of Gobang's head, barking at the Titan to show some manners and eat one piece at a time. Watching them bicker, Juyuk wondered if a party harmony skill existed in the system store. But the mood shifted when Jon angrily bit into a drumstick, and his mouth instantly burst into literal flames. The deadly assassin had drastically underestimated the spicy sauce. Trying to hold back tears, Juyuk burst out laughing, mercilessly teasing the edgy killer for being defeated by a little capsaicin. Amidst the chaos and laughter, Gobang paused his chewing, a warm smile spreading across his face. "The summoner is a very kind person," the giant rumbled softly. Hearing those genuine words, Juyuk felt his heart skip a beat, completely caught off guard by the pure-hearted praise. The towering giant explained his unshakable loyalty. It was all because Juyuk had fed him, Kitchen. Our main character flushed with embarrassment, deeply touched by the giant's pure gratitude. He humbly replied that Gobang was the real hero, and he was just relying on his monstrous strength. But the wholesome moment shattered as Jon smacked the giant's head, sharply correcting him that the word was chicken, not kitchen. Juyuk flinched at the brutal impact. He immediately scolded the shadow assassin for bullying their heavy hitter while he was enjoying his meal so peacefully. Jon bowed in a quick apology, making the excuse that the big guy simply needed some basic education. But deep down, the assassin was seething with jealousy. The giant had practically inhaled all the chicken when no one was looking. The very next day, the trio stepped onto the 17th floor of the ominous Korea Black Tower. The system immediately synced their physical stats to match their current floor level. Their sealed traits and combat skills finally unlocked and surged back to life. Hitting level 17 was a massive milestone for Juyuk. Raw mana coursed through his veins, vibrating with an intensity that was almost impossible to contain. His heart hammered against his ribs, beating with the fierce rhythm of an untamed stallion finally waking from its slumber. He felt absolutely invincible, ready to dive headfirst into the bloodshed. But Jon quickly crushed that confidence, warning that climbers usually die from arrogance around level 20. The assassin firmly volunteered to take the front line. Gobang chimed in with a booming voice, vowing to act as his ultimate shield. He ordered his master to stay back and survive. Shrinking under their overprotective gaze, Juyuk could only nod in defeat. The system flashed the 17th floor objective: annihilate 30 goblin warriors. But the strategy guides he watched online had completely failed to prepare him for reality. Facing them in the flesh was absolutely terrifying. This was not a squad, it was a full goblin battalion of at least 90 troops. And for mere low-class monsters, their tactical formations were dangerously sharp. The standard tower climber's manual dictated a very specific and tedious strategy. The moment the green horde spawns, fall back to the designated safe zone immediately. Then, patiently wait for their massive ranks to divide into small patrol units of 3. To avoid triggering a total bloodbath, climbers must lure and assassinate them a few at a time. It is a grueling cycle of repeating the same cowardly tactic until the quota is met. That textbook method would take hours to finish. Luckily, Juyuk had absolutely no intention of playing by the rules. He locked eyes with his colossal companion and gave the command to strike. Gobang unleashed a deafening war cry as explosive aura erupted from his massive frame. With a living natural disaster on his side, Juyuk knew the 20th floor and beyond would be a total walk in the park. He pointed at the enemy lines and ordered a complete massacre. A greedy smirk crossed his face as he dreamed of the shiny new perks waiting for him. Hearing his master's command, the giant launched forward like a guided missile. The goblin commander screeched a frantic order: "Lock shields and hold the defensive line." A rain of jagged spears descended, but they uselessly bounced off the impenetrable, rock-hard skin of Gobang. The juggernaut slammed directly into their shield wall. The impact sent the green monsters soaring through the air before they violently crashed face first into the dirt. Juyuk watched the one-sided slaughter with absolute awe. It was a harsh reminder of reality. Brilliant tactics and complex strategies only matter when fighting an equal opponent. But matching these pathetic goblins against Gobang, it was like crashing thousands of fragile rental bikes against a heavily armored K2 Black Panther tank. A blue holographic screen materialized before him. System notification. An S+ clear rating had just been achieved on the 17th floor of the Korea Black Tower. He was instantly rewarded with a gleaming S+ platinum badge. Our main character grinned from ear to ear. Jon caught sight of his master's delighted expression, feeling a sting of shock mixed with a bitter dose of jealousy. The trio boldly advanced to the 18th floor. This time, the objective was hunting down goblin assassins. Without hesitation, Juyuk deployed his giant meat shield once again. But these enemies were a different breed entirely, relying heavily on deadly stealth maneuvers and active camouflage. The Shadow Dwellers were utterly baffled as Gobang blindly ripped up entire trees, accidentally crushing the invisible assassins in the process. The giant grumbled in frustration, complaining that his enemies were nowhere to be seen. A cold sweat dripped down the face of Juyuk. He quickly realized this floor was going to be a massive headache. Gobang roared blindly into the empty woods, demanding the cowards reveal themselves. Suddenly, a sinister chuckle echoed from the canopy above. It was Jon. He smugly mocked his master's crude tactics. He had endured that brainless meat shield strategy long enough, and it was finally time to cleanse their eyes with true assassination arts. The pathetic goblin stealth was child's play compared to his terrifying speed. Activating his signature shadow step, Jon vanished into thin air. In a flash of steel, unseen heads rolled across the forest floor. The kill count skyrocketed in seconds. Our main character looked absolutely blown away. Or was he? This was his brilliant master plan all along. Ever since the giant joined the party, Jon had been practically shaking with insecurity over losing his spot as the top summon. Deliberately sparking a toxic rivalry between his two powerful companions was a calculated move, and the results were absolutely flawless. By playing them against each other, he forced them to break their own limits, effectively farming elite badges for him on complete autopilot. He desperately needed to stack those premium perks to elevate his own stats, and he was already knocking on the door of level 18. At last, it was time. Time to let the untamed stallion break out of its cage. Before stepping into this cursed forest, he had memorized every single line of the tower's wiki. He knew the goblin assassin's camouflage was nothing but a low-tier parlor trick. By channeling his mana and sharpening his focus, he could track the subtle shifts in their movements. There was absolutely no reason to panic. He had grinded the shadow step technique to perfection back in the 15th floor farming zones. Gliding effortlessly behind a cloaked enemy, he prepared to strike. But right at the climax, his foot caught on a rogue root, twisting his ankle. Tumbling forward with zero grace, his blade completely missed its mark, only to plunge directly through the hidden goblin's skull by pure chance. Talk about having the devil's own luck. Hey, a kill is a kill in the system's eyes. He let out a nervous breath, pretending that was his brilliant plan all along. But the relief was violently cut short, as a second invisible blade slashed toward his exposed back. On the other side of the battlefield, Jon was dancing through the shadows like a grim reaper. His relentless slaughter pushed the system counter to 25 out of 30. With a blinding flick of his wrist, another green head soared into the sky. Only 3 targets left to clear. Refusing to lose the competition, Gobang bulldozed into the fray, swinging his massive fists like a blind tornado. 3 unlucky assassins were instantly crushed under the giant's random shockwaves. Gobang tried to smash another, but Jon furiously screamed at the brute, claiming his clumsy strikes were ruining the hunt. But mid-argument, the assassin's blood ran cold. He realized Juyuk was completely missing from the safe zone. Back in the deadly thicket of the forest, our main character frantically activated his defensive barrier. He dashed backward, desperate to put space between himself and the snarling goblin horde. Suddenly, a devastating blow crashed against his skull. If not for his glowing energy barrier, that strike would have instantly claimed his life. The monstrous creatures quickly boxed him in, cutting off every possible escape route, but he refused to panic, lowering his center of gravity and shifting into a flawless combat stance. Perhaps it was the battle adrenaline flooding his veins, but the goblin's chaotic movements suddenly grew sluggish. It felt as if time itself had frozen, bending to his absolute will. With ruthless precision, he cut them down one after another. Moments later, a system screen materialized, declaring his glorious achievement. An S+ rank on the 18th floor of Korea's legendary Black Tower. A blinding light revealed his S+ reward, a gleaming platinum badge. Meanwhile, outside the combat zone, Jon frantically scoured the area for his master. When he finally spotted our main character, Juyuk flashed a proud grin, boasting that he had delivered the killing strike. Overwhelmed with relief at seeing him alive, Jon collapsed to his knees, thanking the heavens. Meanwhile, deep inside the administration headquarters, Mina gasped in pure shock. A glowing global notice had just broadcasted an impossible S++ clear of the 18th floor. Director Park beamed with absolute delight. Gwangil smirked, pointing out that Juhyuk was currently an unstoppable force who had prepared for this very moment with terrifying dedication. If Director Park could have his way, he would have shouted to the entire world that the god-tier record holder of Korea's 18 consecutive S+ clears was sitting right under their noses. But Gwangil immediately shot him a deadly glare, warning him never to utter those words, even in jest. Mina nodded grimly, adding that leaking his true identity would paint a massive target on his back. Director Park quickly defended himself, claiming he was simply bursting with pride. Juhyuk had evolved into an unprecedented anomaly, a player who required stricter protection than even the most elite national guilds. It wasn't long before every television screen flashed with breaking news. Reporters excitedly announced that a miraculous storm of change was sweeping through Korea's towering monolith. After a chilling 20-day silence, an unprecedented streak of 18 consecutive S+ clears had shattered reality, entirely rewriting the bloody history of tower climbers. Top experts scrambled to analyze the data, estimating that this mysterious phantom player had already achieved level 19. The frenzy wasn't limited to just awakened hunters. The entire nation was deeply obsessed with unmasking this S+ prodigy. Back home, John clicked off the television and exhaled a heavy, troubled sigh. The heavy atmosphere made Juhyuk squirm uneasily. He told his loyal summon to stop sighing like a dying old man and just spit out whatever was eating at his soul. John's golden eyes locked onto his master, whispering that things were moving entirely too fast. He was terrified by the monstrous speed at which Juhyuk's hidden talents were blossoming. But Juhyuk only tilted his head in sheer confusion. In his own mind, he was still just an ordinary guy lacking any real genius. He completely assumed John was talking about someone else entirely. Juhyuk laughed it off as a ridiculous joke, but John's expression remained dead serious. The shadow step Juhyuk had executed in that final clash was so flawlessly devastating that even a veteran like John would struggle to replicate it. And that sudden burst of mastery was exactly what terrified him. His voice grew stern as he reminded his master that this was a matter of life and death. He delivered a chilling warning. The moment Juhyuk started tasting the thrill of battle, his confidence would inevitably swell. If he abandoned his caution for bravery, he would step straight into the jaws of death. Desperate to keep his master grounded, John reminded him of their ironclad pact. Safety always came first. Absolute survival mattered more than any glorious victory. Juhyuk's gaze softened as he agreed. He swore he wouldn't let the power go to his head, promising to cautiously hunt his enemies one by one. Hearing this, John finally let out a breath of relief. Yet, a lingering shadow of dread clung to his heart. Deep within his soul, he possessed a terrifying premonition that their summoner was destined to cause an apocalyptic disaster. Suddenly, Gobang shattered the serious mood, viciously mocking John for whining and looking like a pathetic, weeping mess. John's eyes flared with murderous rage. He unleashed a lightning-fast kick straight into Gobang's face, roaring that he would boil the little pest alive. The impact sent Gobang crashing into the refrigerator, sending its entire contents exploding across the floor. Seeing the absolute devastation of his kitchen, Juhyuk burst into literal tears. He screamed at his chaotic summons to stop destroying his home, forcefully banishing them back to the Shadow Realm. His heart shattered as he stared at his mother's precious handmade kimchi, painting the floor red. Seeking solace from the madness of his double life, he decided to visit his family the very next morning. As the golden morning sun rose, he pushed open the familiar, worn-out door, cheerfully announcing that their prodigal son had finally returned. His mother's warm voice immediately echoed from the kitchen, welcoming him inside. His father's face lit up with a gentle smile, playfully scolding him to visit more often since he lived so close. His mother quickly swatted at her husband, scolding him for nagging their endlessly busy son. Smiling at their bickering, Juhyuk gently asked his father if his bad hip was feeling any better. The old man grunted, attempting to push himself up, but Juhyuk frantically waved for him to stay seated. His father simply chuckled, brushing it off by saying he rotted in bed half the day anyway, so standing was actually a blessing. Cutting through the sentimental moment, his mother ordered everyone to the dining table, proudly presenting a steaming, soul-warming pot of traditional stew. His father looked around, grumbling about the whereabouts of their youngest brat. His mother assured him that Minhyuk had sprinted out to buy fresh tofu and would be back any second to join the feast. Between bites of the nostalgic meal, Juhyuk carefully asked if the family's financial struggles were worsening. His mother waved her hand dismissively, masking her exhaustion as she promised to secure a new job soon. His father's gaze grew stern as he ordered Juhyuk to focus purely on building his own future instead of carrying their heavy burdens. They adamantly refused to let him send them another dime. Testing the waters of his massive secret, Juhyuk casually threw out a lifeline. He joked about how incredibly convenient it would be if he miraculously awakened as a powerful hunter right now. Bang! His father struck the wooden table, causing Juhyuk's heart to leap into his throat. A terrifying second passed as he wondered if his legendary S+ identity had just been exposed, but the tension instantly vanished as his father erupted into booming laughter. He asked if that was his best comedy routine, claiming there was zero chance of awakening for someone who possessed his perfectly ordinary genes. He mercilessly teased that a so-called hunter couldn't be a grown man who still shrieked and begged his mother to assassinate household cockroaches. Just then, Min Hyuk walked in, laughing until his sides hurt at the ridiculous thought of his cowardly brother fighting monsters. Their mother sighed deeply, muttering that being terrified of bugs wasn't exactly a proud family trait. Shifting the topic, she asked why Ju-hyuk wasn't rushing off to his corporate job. Without missing a beat, he lied through his teeth about having a rare day off, hiding the fact that he had quit ages ago to conquer the Black Tower. A mother's intuition never fails, and her eyes narrowed as she caught his subtle micro-expressions. However, Ju-hyuk strapped on an Oscar-worthy poker face and played beautifully dumb. Choosing to trust her son, she let it go, but sharply warned him never to cross paths with underworld loan sharks. Those chilling words triggered a dark memory he had forcefully buried deep in his mind. The gruesome Smile Cash murder case. He instantly swallowed his rising anxiety, promising her that he would never touch dirty money. Desperate to shift away from the bloody topic, he leaned in and asked exactly what had happened to her recent job. She confessed it was all because of a nightmare customer. While she was servicing a water purifier, the arrogant client demanded she clean up all their recycling and rotting food waste too. Her pride simply couldn't take it. Throwing the customer service ratings out the window, she fiercely snapped right back at them, and naturally, got fired on the spot. His mother was reckless, but undeniably brave. She possessed a fiery spirit that absolutely refused to turn a blind eye to injustice. And that fierce spark was exactly what made his father fall hopelessly in love with her. The man proudly boasted that asking her out was his greatest lifetime achievement. Of course, his dad was the ultimate, proud beta male. Ju-hyuk was beta male junior, and his little brother Min-hyuk proudly carried the beta male title too. It was the perfect proof of their family's unique DNA, physically weak, yet ridiculously stubborn. That was exactly why they would lose their minds with worry if they ever found out he had entered the tower. Deciding to keep his awakening a secret for now, he planned to drop the bombshell only after things settled down. Later on, he stepped out of the building with his little brother and casually handed him a thick stack of cash. Naturally, Min-hyuk's eyes widened, demanding to know what the money was for. Ju-hyuk played it cool, explaining it was extra allowance for their hard-working parents. He instructed the kid to hand it over safely and to keep a close eye on mom and dad to make sure they weren't working themselves to the bone. He was just turning to leave when Min-hyuk suddenly called out for him to wait. Seeing the kid hesitate, Ju-hyuk assumed he was feeling deeply touched about the heavy tuition money he had paid last time. He chuckled to himself, figuring the little punk was just too embarrassed to spit out a proper thank you. Playing the role of the cool older brother, he firmly patted Min-hyuk on the shoulder, saying he totally understood. Min-hyuk's face instantly brightened with relief, finally ready to speak his mind. But instead of a tearful thank you, the kid complained that giving an allowance only to mom and dad felt totally incomplete. With pure shamelessness, he pointed out that Ju-hyuk had completely forgotten his share. Deep down, a vein popped in Ju-hyuk's forehead as annoyance flared toward the greedy little punk. Sighing in absolute defeat, he transferred 500,000 won to the brat, with a strict warning not to blow it all at once. Shortly after, Ju-hyuk stood gazing up at the grand entrance of the Hanam-dong Seoul Awakener Management Administration. He originally intended to just head back to his tiny rented room, but a sudden spark of ambition pulled him toward the Awakener hub instead. Seeing his family's struggles had ignited a fire in his chest. His resolve to climb the tower and do things right had never burned stronger. His buddy Kwangil had told him to give a heads up before visiting, but since he was already standing right there, Ju-hyuk figured it was better to just sneak in unannounced. After all, making his friend come all the way out just to greet him would only make the situation painfully awkward. Sure, he possessed a basic energy shield, but with the monsters mutating into absolute nightmares on the higher floors, he desperately needed physical gear. Then, the clerk dropped a bomb. The shield he wanted cost a staggering 100 million won. His jaw practically hit the floor. Sweating bullets, he nervously babbled that it looked way too heavy and expensive anyway, awkwardly trying to play off the fact that he was completely broke. Inside, his mind was screaming at the astronomical price tag. To make matters even more nerve-wracking, the clerk was an intimidatingly pretty woman, turning his speech into a stuttering mess. He also realized the lobby was absolutely packed with hunters today, a stark contrast to the ghost town it had been during his last visit. Noticing his panic, the female clerk smoothly offered an alternative, a sleek, round buckler forged from a premium alloy of adamant and psionium. Its compact size made it incredibly light and agile. Not only was the price tag much more forgiving, but it even featured a self-repair enchantment. With a professional smile, she suggested he test the grip. The moment he strapped it on, he was amazed at how perfectly it complemented his trusty mace. They looked like a legendary set forged by the same master. Thrilled with the synergy, he eagerly asked for the price. She quoted a much more reasonable 40 million won and gracefully guided him through the payment process. The transaction chimed with success. The sturdy buckler was finally his. Yet, as he walked away, he couldn't help but think that making small talk with a pretty clerk was honestly more terrifying than facing a horde of bloodthirsty goblins. He was just about to head home and call it a day when a stranger's voice stopped him in his tracks. The man smoothly noted that Ju Hyuk must be a freshly awakened rookie. The stranger introduced himself as Choi Hoseok, a fellow player navigating the tower. Ju Hyuk felt the guy was coming on a little too strong, but politely returned the greeting anyway. Flashing a bright smile, Hoseok explained he was a daily regular at the shop. Since Ju Hyuk was a fresh face, he simply wanted to break the ice and make a new ally. Getting right to business, he asked what floor Ju Hyuk was challenging. Hoseok proudly revealed he was pushing through the fierce 30s. Feeling small, Ju Hyuk muttered that he was only in the teens. In a flash, Hoseok realized he was talking to a low-level beginner. But instead of looking down on him, his face lit up. He enthusiastically promised that if Ju Hyuk ever hit a wall in the tower, he could ask him for absolutely anything. Ju Hyuk was caught off guard. This guy wasn't arrogant. He was genuinely pure-hearted. He radiated the golden retriever energy of a natural extrovert. Still keeping his guard up, Ju Hyuk politely deflected, saying he hadn't faced any real danger just yet. Unfazed, Hoseok warmly encouraged him to reach out any time, assuring him he was always hanging around the area. With a cheerful wave, he finally bid his goodbyes. Ju Hyuk stood there, utterly defeated by the man's fearless, overwhelming social skills. It immediately sparked a painful realization. A guy with that much charm definitely had a gorgeous girlfriend. A bitter wave of envy washed over him. Later that night, Ju Hyuk opened his status window and grinned. He had officially hit level 19. The path to the 19th floor was completely wide open. But before diving into the abyss, he had some crucial team planning to do. It was time to summon Jon and strategize. The spirit materialized in an instant, deeply bowing to thank his master for the generous 5-star rating. Beaming with pride, Ju Hyuk showed off his shiny new buckler. But the moment Jon saw the defensive gear, the little guy burst into dramatic, heartbreaking tears. Sobbing uncontrollably, he asked if his master really intended to walk into such deadly peril. Sweating at the dramatic reaction, Ju Hyuk frantically promised he would play it as safe as humanly possible. Sniffling miserably, Jon pointed out that his last deceased master had said the exact same words. To calm his summon down, Ju Hyuk proudly declared his ultimate survival strategy. He was a supreme beta male. The second things got sketchy. He would turn tail and run. Wiping away his tears, Jon forced him to swear a solemn oath right then and there. If a boss monster cornered them, Ju Hyuk had to ruthlessly sacrifice his summons and save his own life. Touched by the loyalty, Ju Hyuk firmly promised. But then, Jon slyly whispered an addendum. If a sacrifice was truly needed, he should definitely throw Gobang to the wolves instead of him. Jon was fully prepared to clear the dungeon zone. But then, a heavenly aroma stopped him in his tracks. Ju Hyuk had surprised him with a massive portion of king-size dumplings. Jon was deeply touched that his master fed him before even thinking about Gobang. He was just about to take a delicious bite when a chilling sensation suddenly pierced the air. While Ju Hyuk happily chewed his food, Jon lowered his voice to a serious whisper. He asked if there was anyone out there who harbored a deadly grudge against him. Ju Hyuk shook his head with his cheeks stuffed full. But Jon remained on high alert. He warned that someone standing right outside their door was leaking a massive amount of killing intent. All the color instantly drained from the face of Ju Hyuk. A heavy knock echoed through the room. Then, a raspy voice called out from the hallway, asking if anyone was home. Ju Hyuk immediately ordered Jon to hide in the shadows. He hastily activated his glowing energy shield. Boom! A gunshot completely shattered the lock, and the door violently burst open. A suspicious man casually peeked his head inside and smirked. The eyes of Ju Hyuk widened in absolute disbelief. It was the exact same shady guy he had spotted at the player shop. Hoseok clicked his tongue, complaining that tracking him down had been a massive headache. When Ju Hyuk demanded answers, Hoseok barked at him to shut his mouth and drop his weapons. His voice dripped with pure venom as he screamed absolute murder. The terrifying threat of death hung heavy in the air. Hand over the spatial bracelet and the entire inventory, or else. He threatened to turn the head of Ju Hyuk into a bloody honeycomb. The cold steel of a gun barrel was violently pressed right against his forehead. The heart of Ju Hyuk completely sank to the floor. Trying to fight back in this position was absolute suicide. But slowly, silently, a dark shadow materialized right behind Hoseok. It was Jon. This arrogant fool had picked the absolute worst person to rob. Hoseok sneered, claiming he was dead serious about pulling the trigger. But deep down, he was celebrating his easy payday. Ju Hyuk stood frozen in pure terror, completely paralyzed by the firearm. Hoseok internally laughed like a maniac. He was absolutely thrilled that he had chosen such a pathetic, helpless prey. In his twisted experience, weaklings always surrendered their gear after a good beating. He ordered Juyuk to empty his pockets before things got bloody. But Jon made the first move. Bam! Jon ruthlessly slammed the heavy pommel of his dagger straight into the back of his skull. The eyes of Hosiuk rolled back in absolute shock. He never expected another living soul to be hiding inside that apartment. He desperately tried to force himself back up, but his legs instantly turned to jelly, and he collapsed face first onto the cold, hard floor. Juyuk just stood there, completely and utterly speechless. Once he finally snapped out of it, he gave Jon endless praise for a job well done. A massive wave of relief washed over him. Thank the heavens, Jon only knocked the bastard out instead of snapping his neck. He had been terrified that his summon might trigger a brutal bloodbath like some mindless berserker. Staring down at the unconscious body, Juyuk quickly connected the dots. This scumbag had to be a notorious item broker. These filthy scavengers were absolute parasites. They ruthlessly murdered players who lost their tower-buffed stats in the real world just to loot their hard-earned gear. The gruesome rumors were actually true. Kwang Il had once warned him about this exact danger. That was exactly why elite guild members received 24/7 personal protection outside the tower walls. Without the tower system, most players were just as incredibly fragile as ordinary civilians. If Juyuk had not awakened his overpowered summoning ability in the real world, he would definitely be a corpse right now. Once again, he realized just how absolutely game-breaking his power truly was. Meanwhile, Jon was busy happily tying a ribbon around the unconscious criminal like a neat little present. Jon casually offered to take out the trash and bury the body forever. But Juyuk frantically waved his hands, insisting they should just call the police instead. Jon tilted his head in pure confusion. He argued that there was absolutely no need for the authorities. He could just drag the body into a dark alley and make him vanish without a trace. Juyuk desperately pleaded that calling the cops was the only sane option. Meanwhile, back at the guild headquarters, Director Park nearly choked when he heard Juyuk had visited the shop again. Kwang Il wiped the nervous sweat from his brow. He quickly explained that the kid had sneaked off when no one was looking. Director Park aggressively demanded to know what kind of gear he bought. Kwang Il sheepishly admitted that he only purchased a single, basic, round buckler. Director Park groaned in utter frustration. If only that stubborn kid had signed their guild contract. They could have dressed him in legendary tier armor from head to toe. He then eagerly asked if they had figured out his class traits yet. Kwang Il confidently analyzed the situation. Since the boy bought a heavy mace and a shield, he was undoubtedly a frontline melee fighter. In their professional minds, they pictured Juyuk as a brave, unstoppable knight charging into battle. But Director Park heavily disagreed with that simple logic. If this kid was truly a close combat brawler, then basic protective gear was basically a death sentence. A full set of heavy armor was absolutely mandatory for his survival. Kwang Il nodded in agreement, promising to invent a clever excuse to gift the boy a full armor set. Suddenly, his smartphone started ringing off the hook. His stomach dropped when he saw the caller ID. It was the local police department. He nervously apologized to the director and immediately stepped away to answer. The moment he heard the voice on the other end, his entire body froze stiff. He slammed the phone down, sprinted out of the building, and drove his car like an absolute madman. Arriving at the apartment complex, he wildly dashed up the stairs, leaping 2 steps at a time. A wave of bitter regret hit him. He should have forced that elite contract on Juyuk from day one. His chest tightened with unbearable anxiety, absolutely terrified that his golden rookie was lying in a pool of blood. But back inside the room, the scene was entirely different. The police were aggressively handcuffing Hosiok for armed home invasion. Hosiok wailed and screamed in absolute agony as the steel cuffs locked tight around his wrists. Like a desperate rat, he tried to flip the script. He shrieked that he was the real victim and that Juyuk had violently kidnapped him. Juyuk waved his hands in total panic, yelling that the crazy bastard broke down his door. But the strict officers refused to listen to reason. They demanded that the homeowner come down to the station for intense questioning as well. A cold sweat broke out on the face of Juyuk. For one terrifying second, he actually imagined himself rotting away in a prison cell. He looked pale as a ghost. But right at that very moment, Kwang Il violently burst through the shattered doorway. The eyes of Hosok instantly lit up when he saw the famous guild recruiter. He mistakenly thought his ultimate savior had just arrived to rescue him. He started crying fake tears, loudly claiming Juyuk tried to murder him and steal his precious items, but before he could finish his pathetic lie, smack, Kwang Il delivered a devastating slap right across his filthy face. Hosok hit the floor, completely and utterly dumbfounded. Kwang Il glared down at him with blazing fury. How dare this absolute scum lie to his face after daring to assassinate a fellow player? Even with a massive red handprint on his stinging cheek, Hosok pathetically continued to beg. He swore on his life that he was the innocent victim in all of this. Gwenjil's voice was absolute ice as he stripped away Hosiuk's player status. Another brutal strike followed. Hosiuk's eyes widened in sheer panic. The realization finally hit him. His desperate pleas were falling on deaf ears. With a flick of his wrist, Gwangil ordered the officers to haul the trash away. He promised the National Intelligence Service would be waiting for him to personally escort him to hell. The National Intelligence Service didn't just handle awakened criminals. They broke them with unimaginable torment. The mere mention of their names shattered Hosiek's remaining sanity. He wailed like a cornered rat, blaming his sins on momentary greed while begging for mercy. But Gwangil's gaze remained utterly devoid of pity. He had crushed far too many parasitic scum to believe a single word. Scumbags like this never stopped at just one crime. Gwangil knew it was only a matter of time before the system dug up every filthy skeleton in his closet. He coldly advised the traitor to hire the best defense attorney alive, not that any sane lawyer would dare defend a man marked by the National Intelligence Service. Turning his back on the pathetic display, Gwangil locked down the transfer protocol. If the rat tried warping into the tower to escape, the officers just needed to hold the perimeter. The tower's return mechanic would spit him right back into their waiting cuffs. Sobbing uncontrollably, Hosiek was dragged into the shadows of justice. The murderous aura vanished instantly as Gwangil faced Juhyuk. With barely contained concern, he checked the young main character for injuries. Juhyuk simply shrugged it off, claiming his nerves were just a bit rattled. The high-ranking official spoke the young man's name with heavy reverence. Then, he did the unthinkable, bowing his head at a perfect 90-degree angle in absolute remorse. He swore upon his honor that the guild's shield would never fail him again. Gwangil made a silent, ironclad vow. It was time to lock Juhyuk down with the ultimate elite contract. This wasn't about securing a guild asset anymore. This was about protecting a rising star. The following morning, Jon approached his master, his tone dripping with unspoken curiosity about the previous day's chaos. Juhyuk offered a relaxed smile. Thanks to Jon's flawless intervention, the authorities had carted the garbage away. The lethal subordinate tilted his head, asking if the traitor's execution was scheduled. When Juhyuk said no, Jon casually hid his razor-sharp dagger behind his back and politely asked for the prison's coordinates. Sweating bullets, Juhyuk sternly ordered his bloodthirsty companion to drop the assassination plot immediately. To change the subject, he channeled his mana and called forth Gobang. The goblin subordinate was absolutely vibrating with excitement. He had received a magnificent 5-star rating. Tears of joy streamed down his face as he marveled at the unprecedented glorious score. Honestly, Juhyuk was just shocked to discover his minion knew basic math. With their spirits high, the trio breached the 19th floor of the infamous Korean Black Tower. The system interface flashed. Annihilate 30 goblin shamans! The cavern was swarming with the foul spellcasters, but to our overpowered crew, they were nothing but cannon fodder. These pathetic creatures possessed zero explosive firepower. Their entire arsenal consisted of irritating hexes, low-level binding chains, and a handful of fragile summoned grunts. Sure, getting hit by a debuff would be a minor headache, but with his current lineup, Juhyuk didn't even need to draw his weapon. Like an unchained beast, Gobang rocketed straight into the enemy formation. The panicked shamans unleashed a barrage of dark magic, but the furious goblin merely sucked in a massive breath of air. An earth-shattering roar erupted from his lungs. Juhyuk watched in pure disbelief. The incoming curses literally shattered against the sheer sonic shockwave. It was an overwhelming display of raw, brutish dominance. Meanwhile, Jon melted into the shadows like a true assassin. Slipping behind enemy lines, he coldly reminded his comrade to speed up the slaughter. Gobang flashed a savage grin, roaring that his only mission was total annihilation. The dual assault began. Jon's blades danced through the darkness, reaping souls with terrifying precision. On the other side, Gobang pulverized everything in his path with bone-crushing haymakers. Watching the glorious carnage unfold, Juhyuk felt his hunter's blood ignite. He desperately wanted a piece of the action, but before he could even take a single combat stance. Ding! The glowing blue panels announced the 19th floor was completely conquered. He caught his 2 overpowered summons stealthily whispering to one another. Jon wiped imaginary blood from his dagger and smoothly claimed it was a light warm-up. The horrific realization dawned on Juhyuk. These overly protective lunatics had speed-run the entire floor on purpose. They deliberately wiped the map just to keep him out of danger. He had been completely bamboozled by his own minions. The system chimes rang out like a victory fanfare. A flawless S+ rank for the 19th floor. A dazzling platinum badge materialized in his inventory as a testament to their overwhelming speed. Dawn broke on a new day of grinding. With unyielding determination, our main character stepped through the dimensional gate of the 20th floor. This wasn't just another stage. This was the legendary milestone floor. Known as the ultimate talent filter, it was a brutal meat grinder that crushed weak players without mercy. Even the ever-confident Jon dropped his playful demeanor. He issued a grim warning. This zone was a death trap, swarming with every hellish goblin variant in existence. Toxic dart scouts hiding in the canopy, elite warriors holding perfect phalanx formations, shadow assassins striking from the void, crazed shamans. and terrifyingly massive hobgoblins that shook the very earth. Jon didn't sugarcoat the threat level. This biome was absolute nightmare fuel. He practically begged his master to stay perfectly still and let them handle the bloodshed. Nudging his brawny comrade with a sharp elbow, Jon silently commanded the goblin to back him up. Gobang puffed out his massive chest with unwavering loyalty. He thumped his heart, swearing that his lord wouldn't even need to breathe on a weapon. He would personally paint the floor with their enemy's blood. The bloody crimson quest log materialized. Slaughter 100 goblins and execute 1 hobgoblin. Time limit: 10 agonizing hours. Penalty for failure: absolute deletion from this world. Juyuk's eyes narrowed as he caught on to their scheme. His overly devoted shadows were trying to wrap him in bubble wrap again. They were going to steal all the combat experience. Tactical orders flew from Jon's lips. Gobang was to act as the ultimate meat shield and pull all the aggro. While the monstrous horde was distracted, the assassin would strike. Like a raging bull, Gobang initiated the clash. A storm of lethal skills erupted from the monster horde. Poison, steel, and dark magic darkened the sky. But Juyuk's pride roared to life. He utterly refused to be an idle spectator in his own growth. Jon's eyes widened in sheer panic. Unsheathing his weapon, Juyuk exploded into a full sprint. Using Gobang's broad shoulders as a literal springboard, he launched himself high into the sky. He dove headfirst into the deadly crossfire. And a thrilling surge of adrenaline confirmed he made the right choice. Behind him, Jon screamed in absolute terror for his master's safety. But in that mid-air suspension, the hands of time began to rewind. Memories of a far more fragile era surfaced. Long before the tower, Juyuk was a boy swallowed by his own crippling shyness. A quiet child, whose entire world was just a simple toy car. When a neighborhood bully ripped that joy from his hands, his voice had completely abandoned him. The voiceless suffering only mutated in elementary school, where the crushing weight of grinding poverty locked him in a cage of shame. Through the bitter years of middle school, he existed as a mere phantom. Laughter echoed in the halls around him, but he remained forever isolated in his own lonely bubble. By high school, even the simple act of eating lunch was a solo battle against the silence. Never again. He had existed as a phantom in his own life, a total outcast. He was too paralyzed by the fear of judgment to even attempt to change his miserable reality. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine he would be inside a tower, clashing with nightmarish monsters. This was a guy who couldn't even make eye contact with the local bullies. But these beasts weren't human. Down here in the dungeon, he didn't have to navigate the terrifying maze of social politics, fear, or human interaction. To him, they were nothing more than low-level quest mobs in a video game, so he locked onto a single bloody goal: wipe every last one of them off the map and claim the loot. Jon roared at him to fall back. A horde of spear-wielding goblins surged forward like a green tide, but Juyuk didn't even blink. He practically melted into the shadows, slipping right behind the nearest beast. Bam! He slammed his shield into its grotesque face with bone-crushing force. He bounced from one goblin to the next, unleashing a flurry of devastating strikes. Jon watched in absolute awe. He couldn't believe his eyes. How was Juyuk already mastering the shadow walk technique in such a ridiculously short time? Suddenly, a barrage of concentrated magic beams hurtled straight toward Juyuk's blind spot. Jon screamed at the top of his lungs for him to watch his six. Pure survival instinct kicked in, and Juyuk hoisted his shield. If it hadn't been for the energy barrier flaring to life, he would have been skewered into a human pincushion. The chilling reality of the tower finally sank in. He instantly regretted trying to act like a fearless hero. Jon yelled for him to make a tactical retreat toward the cliff's edge. Gobang didn't waste a single heartbeat. The massive beast lunged forward to act as a living shield, while a frenzied pack of goblins scrambled fiercely after Juyuk. His lungs burned as his stamina bar plummeted into the red. Skidding to a halt, he stared at a dead end. Was this really where his story would end? Cold panic gripped his throat. His escape route was gone, and he was completely out of options. With the bloodthirsty goblins closing the distance, he braced himself for death. But then, a mountain-like shadow eclipsed him. Gobang planted himself in front of Juyuk, raising a colossal arm. Looming over the quivering goblins, he crushed them into the dirt with ruthless efficiency. Jon charged into the fray, his blade dancing as goblin heads rolled across the cavern floor. He tossed Gobang a smirk, praising the gentle giant for a flawless execution. Up on the ridge, goblin shamans scrambled to chant their dark spells. But Jon was a blur of lethal speed. He scaled the cliff and severed their heads before they could even finish a single incantation. Wiping his blade, Jon scanned the blood-soaked battlefield. They had already slaughtered over 100 of these green runts, so the system was bound to spawn something much worse. Juyuk let out a shaky breath, completely mind-blown that they had annihilated the horde in the blink of an eye. Yet, he looked incredibly uncomfortable. Drenched in sweat and trembling like a leaf, he forced a nervous smile. He politely begged Gobang to step forward just a tiny bit, painfully aware of the giant's backside hovering way too close to his face. Boom! Suddenly, the earth violently shook. A towering, oddly proportioned beast crashed into the clearing, letting out a chilling, sorrowful roar. It was the absolute peak of the goblin evolution tree, a hobgoblin. Without missing a beat, Jon launched himself off the cliff like a missile. He barked an order at Gobang. The giant caught the drift instantly, charging like a freight train straight at the boss monster to draw its aggro. Gobang caught the monster's twin swords barehanded, shoving it back with immense, overpowering strength. Then, he hoisted the beast off the ground by its thick neck, earning a proud nod from Jon. Looks like the big guy was finally pulling his weight. Jon ordered him to lock the monster in place. Descending from above, Jon plunged his blades flawlessly through both of the hobgoblin's eyes. Ding! The system window illuminated the darkness. Mission complete. 100 out of 100 goblins eradicated, and 1 out of 1 hobgoblins executed. The 20th floor trial had been utterly conquered. Our unlikely hero leveled up once again, and a shower of high-tier loot rained down. 2 kilograms of pure magic stones and 5 tower-exclusive healing potions. Jon flashed a wicked grin, clapping Juyuk on the back for surviving the raid. Juyuk was practically paralyzed with shock. The boss mob had been deleted like it was nothing. He made a mental note to let these 2 absolute monsters handle all the heavy lifting from now on. Bowing at a perfect 90-degree angle, he poured out his gratitude for their protection, humbled by their sheer strength. His companions respectfully returned the gesture. The system's golden text flashed across the world. Player Bong Juyuk had achieved an unbelievable S++ clear rating on the 20th floor of the Korea Black Tower. The mythical reward for an S++ rank materialized, a shimmering platinum badge. With this artifact in hand, the gates to the 21st floor were finally open. Meanwhile, in the real world, the news of the Korea Black Tower's flawless clear hit the internet like a nuclear bomb. The Hunter community forums completely melted down. Keyboard warriors were losing their minds. One user swore the player had died since the rankings hadn't updated in 2 weeks. Another frantically speculated about how high this phantom could climb. A veteran commenter pointed out that the absolute limit was the 30th floor. Rumors flew wild, with half the community convinced this was a covert operation by a top-ranking elite guild. The most popular theory? The player was laying low out of pure paranoia, terrified that rival nations would send agents to poach their talent. Little did they know, Juyuk had just shattered every known record by steamrolling 20 consecutive floors entirely under the radar. It was a legendary milestone, but Juyuk knew absolute chaos would erupt if his identity leaked. Back at the agency, executives were desperately brainstorming ways to muzzle the press. Director Park slammed his hand on the table, instantly shutting the idea down. He warned that trying to suppress the media would only put a massive target on their mysterious S+ rankers back. Shifting the focus, he demanded a full background check on Juhyuk's family. Kwang-il adjusted his glasses, confirming that everything was being handled in the shadows with absolute secrecy. He pulled up the dossier. Target's father is Bong Soo-chul, he reported. He was involved in a severe winter collision on an icy road. Following major hip surgery a few months ago, he is currently struggling through physical rehabilitation. Director Park narrowed his eyes, asking how they planned to win him over. Kwang-il smoothly replied that they were pulling strings to transfer the father to Korea's most prestigious VIP medical facility. Make it happen, Director Park commanded. Kwang-il then flipped the page to Juyuk's younger brother, Bong Min-hyuk. He was a freshman in college with his mandatory military service coming up fast. Park didn't hesitate, ordering his team to grease the wheels for his enlistment and secure him a full-ride scholarship. And the final piece of the puzzle, the mother, Hong Gumja. Kwang-il noted she was formerly a water purifier technician, but currently out of work. The guild was weaving an invisible net of wealth and protection around his entire family. Rumor had it she was ruthlessly terminated from her position. The true cause? A fiery clash with a hopelessly arrogant customer. Gwangil's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. He warned that Gangja was the ultimate wildcard. She was the one variable they could not afford to underestimate. She wielded absolute authority over the household. Her temper was so legendary that even her husband and sons trembled at the mere thought of crossing her. A sinister smirk crept across Director Park's face. With this newfound leverage, their grand scheme was practically guaranteed to work. He gave the green light without a second thought. They were to mobilize the full, crushing weight of the Awakener Management Administration to secure their victory. Kwang-il bowed deeply, confirming their insidious support for Juyuk's family would commence at once. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Jon's nose twitched wildly as the heavenly aroma of delivery food flooded the room. Gobang was literally vibrating with chaotic energy. Juyuk desperately hissed at his summons to freeze and keep quiet. He ordered his mystical companions to hide in the shadows. Panic setting in, he hastily threw a thick blanket over Gobang's bulging form. The delivery driver practically staggered inside. He unloaded a massive mountain of 12 sweet and sour pork dishes and 12 colossal bowls of black bean noodles. Chuckling, the guy asked if Juyuk was hosting a giant banquet. Juyuk offered a nervous laugh, muttering that it was something along those lines. The driver grinned widely, proudly announcing he had tossed in some free fried dumplings as a bonus. With a cheerful wave, he told Juyuk to enjoy the epic feast and be sure to order again. But internally, Juyuk was fiercely judging the restaurant's stinginess. Only one measly plate of free dumplings for an order this monumental? He scoured the plastic bags like a hawk looking for prey. Not a single discount coupon in sight. With a heavy sigh, he forced himself to accept reality. Who even used paper coupons in this modern era anyway? Waving his hand, he signaled to his hidden beasts that the coast was finally clear. John was absolutely mesmerized by the intoxicating scent of roasted black beans. Gobang was already a drooling mess. Juyuk smirked, knowing these otherworldly creatures had never experienced the sheer glory of modern junk food. Gobang eagerly shoved a dumpling into his gaping maw, marveling at the divine crunch. But John could only stare in sheer, unadulterated horror as Gobang casually devoured the ceramic plate right along with it. A sweat drop rolled down Juyuk's forehead. He told them to just keep eating while he handled some business. With a swift thought, he summoned his digital inventory screen. He had finally hit the milestone. 20 platinum badges collected, unlocking a highly classified system perk. His heart thumped with greedy anticipation. What kind of overpowered reward was waiting for him? A golden system prompt flashed before his eyes. He had obtained a mysterious random box. His pupils dilated, burning with the thrilling fever of a true gacha addict. This wasn't just any box. It guaranteed 3 random drops from the legendary tower. The loot pool was utterly massive. It held everything from basic magic stones to 10 varieties of mystical flora and 3 grades of indestructible tower steel. But that wasn't all. It included over 50 types of monstrous hides, life-saving potions, miraculous elixirs, along with brutal weapons, enchanted armor, accessories, and even devastating combat manuals. It could drop sacred level-up runes, granting up to 5 instant levels. Or even the mythical tower-jumping tickets, allowing a climber to bypass up to 5 treacherous floors in a single breath. The drop list went on. God-tier skill cooldown reset tickets and ultra-rare trait enhancement runes were all hiding within this tiny, pixelated cube. And the crown jewels of the pool? Summoned entity rank-up runes, border-shattering multinational access passes, and guaranteed summon tickets. Tickets that could yield an SR, an SSR, or even a reality-breaking LSSR tier minion. Juyuk let out an exhausted groan. The drop table was ridiculously bloated. He didn't even recognize half the legendary artifacts staring back at him from the system window. Since his fate was in the hands of the chaotic random number gods anyway, he decided to just skim the rest. Basic magic stones, glowing weeds, and raw metals were absolute trash-tier pulls in his eyes. Weapons and armor were painfully average. A level-up rune sounded tempting, but it carried a fatal flaw. He would gain the raw stats, but remain trapped on his current floor. A tower-jumping ticket would solve that, letting him skip the grueling climb altogether. But wait, skipping floors meant abandoning all the precious loot hidden within them. Unacceptable. With that greedy logic in mind, the raw, stat-boosting power of the level-up rune was vastly superior. The multinational tower access ticket definitely piqued his interest, a golden passport that would let him plunder the untamed dungeons of foreign nations. Yet, the absolute holy grail was the guaranteed rank summon ticket. If the heavens smiled upon him and granted an LSSR entity, his life would be set. He could just dump all the blood, sweat, and monster slaying onto his new godly minion while he coasted to the top. He could already picture it. Reclining in a luxurious velvet-lined carriage, sipping tea while his unstoppable summons decimated everything in their path. His heart swelled with dangerous amounts of hope. 3 items, 3 chances to strike it rich. Clasping his hands together, he prayed to the system gods and cracked the mystical box wide open. If he pulled a legendary unit, he swore he would never commit a sin again. The digital cube began to spin wildly, emitting a blinding light. The tension was suffocating. Ding. His inventory immediately registered 10 kilograms of basic magic stones. Juyuk's soul left his body. What an absolute, undeniable trash pull. He could farm these shiny rocks in his sleep. Still, he grit his teeth and did the math. On the black market, that was roughly 5 million won in cold hard cash, not entirely worthless. He took a deep breath and unveiled the second drop. Flash. A system notification chimed. He had acquired the primordial thunderclap staff. The weapon instantly materialized within his holographic status window, crackling with unseen energy. The name screamed of an ancient, martial arts destruction technique. Could it be a devastating new attack skill? He pushed his excitement down to review the stats later. It was time for the final, fateful pull. The light faded, revealing a summoned entity rank-up rune. Juyuk let out a triumphant roar. The gacha gods had finally blessed him. He had struck the absolute jackpot. This single glowing stone had the power to shatter the natural limits of a summon's rank. It was exactly what his arsenal needed. But as the hype faded, A massive dilemma crashed down on him. Who actually deserved to evolve? Jon was sitting pretty at SR rank, while Gobang was a measly R rank. But if he was being brutally honest, they were both completely brain-dead gluttons. Coughing awkwardly, he quickly reclassified them in his mind as quirky but reliable comrades. However, that flimsy lie only made his agonizing choice 10 times harder. He leaned toward blessing Jon, simply out of loyalty for all the late-night meals they had shared. But wait. If he measured loyalty by calories consumed, Gobang was miles ahead of the competition. The system chimed in with a vital detail. The rank-up rune's evolutionary boost was directly tied to the target's hidden potential. A high-ceiling beast could jump multiple tiers at once. There was just one massive catch. While undergoing the agonizing evolution process, the entity would be completely locked out of the summoning pool. Weighing his current combat power, he concluded they had plenty of raw strength to spare. He would trigger Jon's evolution later tonight, but right now, his fingers twitched with anticipation. It was time to unleash his brand new primordial skill. The skill was known as the Primordial Thunderclap Staff. It infused any weapon with the devastating power of lightning, divided into 3 ultimate forms. Even better, it was a rare growth-type ability. This was exactly the kind of explosive firepower he had been desperately searching for. Without a second thought, he absorbed the knowledge. The first form, Soul-Chasing Thunderbolt, shattered its seal. The profound martial techniques etched themselves directly into his mind. Eager to test his newfound destructive might, he gripped his mace tightly and swung with all his strength, channeling the soul-chasing thunderbolt. But absolutely nothing happened. A heavy, awkward silence filled the room. Honestly, he already expected this anticlimactic outcome. If awakened beings could unleash such catastrophic aura in the real world, modern society would have crumbled to dust ages ago, especially with absolute lunatics like Jose running around. He resolved to properly test its legendary might inside the tower. A little while later, Jon gave him a deeply concerning look, asking why he was suddenly swinging his mace at thin air. Juyuk casually explained that he had unlocked a brand new skill from his system perk rewards. Jon immediately froze, demanding to know if it was an offensive technique. With a proud smirk, Juyuk nodded, bragging that it was a legendary growth-type ability. Jon let out a tragic gasp of horror, dropping his rice bowl in pure shock. Without missing a beat, Gobang scooped the spilled food off the floor and happily swallowed it down. Jon exploded with blazing fury. It was their very last bowl of food, and he aggressively screamed at Gobang to spit it out instantly. Amidst their chaotic bickering, Juyuk simply unsummoned the 2 troublemakers. The following morning, he sat in deep contemplation. He completely understood the source of Jon's terrifying anxiety. His unique awakening trait dictated a harsh reality. The summoned beings were the true source of the player's overwhelming combat power. Simply put, a summoner was meant to stay safely hidden in the backlines, never engaging in the bloody vanguard. This absolute rule was even more critical for an irregular anomaly like him, someone actually capable of manifesting spiritual entities in the real world. Juyuk was painfully aware of one chilling fact. Jon's previous master, a summoner from a parallel dimension, had possessed unimaginable strength far surpassing his own. Yet, even that powerhouse had met a brutal end. When that master fell, his entire world was reduced to ashes alongside him. With such a tragic history haunting him, Jon's intense paranoia over his new master's safety made perfect sense. But Juyuk had his own pride as a man. He had finally awakened his potential, tasted the thrilling power of a true hunter, and he desperately wanted to unleash his newly acquired martial art. Since the system bound them with absolute obedience anyway, he was fully confident he could talk them into it. With a commanding presence, he summoned them both back into reality. They materialized from the void, but Jon's face was as pale as a ghost and dripping with gloom. Juyuk was honestly baffled that someone could look so utterly devastated overnight. With a trembling voice, Jon confessed his deepest fear. He believed this new offensive skill would become a deadly poison, tempting his master into a fatal frontline clash. He admitted that his anxiety had been eating him alive ever since they conquered the 20th floor. He had only tolerated the danger back then because they were slaughtering weak, low-level goblins. This tearful confession confirmed Juyuk's exact suspicions. Jon was absolutely terrified of him acting like a combat class. The familiar then coldly declared that fighting ruthless orcs was completely out of the question. Bracing himself for the backlash, Juyuk offered an early apology, warning them that he was about to commit a serious offense against their rules. He jokingly asked if Jon was planning to bind him up with some ridiculous butterfly knot. Jon firmly denied it, but his eyes flashed dangerously as he declared the 3rd law of summoning officially active. The 3 absolute laws of summoned entities were quite straightforward. The first law dictated that a summon must prioritize protecting their master's life above everything in existence. The second law stated that a summoned entity must submit to their master's commands with absolute obedience. However, if a command ever dangerously conflicted with their safety, The first law of protection would completely override the second. Taking the cue, Gobang instantly lunged and bear-hugged Juhyuk with monstrous strength. Jon aggressively smacked Gobang over the back of the head, yelling that the plan was to restrain their master only after stepping inside the tower. Their overprotective strategy was flawless. Once they crossed the dimensional threshold, Gobang would physically lock Juhyuk down, leaving Jon to slaughter every single monster by himself. The bitter truth finally hit Juhyuk like a truck. His own loyal summons had orchestrated a full-blown mutiny against his fighting ambitions. He really did not want to sink this low, but he activated his ultimate secret weapon, the pathetic, irresistible puppy dog eyes. He pleaded with Jon for just one chance, swearing on his life he would stay safe. Jon stubbornly crossed his arms, refusing to trust a single word. Juhyuk frantically promised he would never charge headfirst into danger alone again. Eyes narrowing, Jon asked if he truly meant it. Juhyuk desperately argued that hiding behind them forever would stunt his growth. He literally begged his own familiars to just let him secure a single, solitary kill. He vowed to maintain a safe distance and strike with extreme caution. Jon grumbled under his breath, clearly torn. But Juhyuk stood his ground, his eyes burning with unwavering determination. Letting out a heavy sigh, Jon finally surrendered but laid down one strict condition. The very second he sensed even a fraction of danger, he would crash the battle. Juhyuk eagerly accepted the terms without a second thought. With their chaotic negotiations settled, they boldly stepped onto the 21st floor of the Korea Black Tower. As they navigated the eerie, shadow-filled forest, Jon warned him that orcs possessed monstrous physical strength but entirely lacked intelligence. Though, to be completely fair, even a brainless orc was probably a genius compared to Gobang. Gobang instantly threw a tantrum, angrily declaring his intellect was vastly superior to a filthy orc. Jon ruthlessly told him to shut his mouth. Suddenly, Juhyuk halted their advance, suggesting they practice the new technique 10 times before entering combat. Jon eagerly supported the idea, enthusiastically pushing his master to run through the forms even more than that. With a wicked grin, Jon forced Gobang to sit perfectly still on the ground. He proudly presented the massive summon as the ultimate training dummy, giving Juhyuk full permission to bash him without mercy. A bead of sweat dropped from Juhyuk's face, feeling incredibly uneasy about this brutal setup. Jon relentlessly urged his master to smash Gobang 10 times in a row. He confidently claimed that even if Juhyuk unleashed his maximum destructive power, Gobang's iron-like skin would not suffer a single scratch, making him the absolute perfect punching bag. Flashing a terrifyingly dopey smile, Gobang gave a thumbs up. He cheerfully reassured his master that a few mortal blows would not hurt a bit. Horrified by their casual cruelty, Juhyuk firmly rejected the offer. He threatened to sprint straight into the monster horde alone if they kept pushing him. Besides, the profound martial principles of the thunderclap art were already burned flawlessly into his consciousness. He firmly believed that testing his lightning arts on a hostile orc would be far less traumatizing than bludgeoning his own loyal companion. Brushing past his eccentric summons, he ordered them to push deeper into the forest. Left behind, Jon could only weep tears of utter despair for his master's safety. The deadly trial of the 21st floor had officially commenced. Annihilate 30 savage forest orcs before the brutal 4-hour timer hit 0. The monstrous orc horde closed in, but Jon was already a blur of motion. Not wanting to be outdone, Gobang let out a thunderous roar, crossing the battlefield in a single, earth-shattering leap. The ground cratered as Gobang unleashed a barrage of devastating punches. Meanwhile, Jon was a storm of blades, effortlessly severing heads and carving a bloody path through the enemy ranks. Juhyuk watched in absolute disbelief. Their overwhelming speed was beyond human comprehension. A sudden wave of panic washed over him. If this massacre continued, he would not secure a single kill. Suddenly, one lone orc stood paralyzed in confusion as Jon intentionally dashed right past it. A spark of realization hit Juhyuk. His loyal summon had left him a target. He sprinted forward with all his might, while Jon casually shouted that he would observe the master at work. The beast locked eyes with Juhyuk and swung its massive blade with deadly force. But Juhyuk gracefully slipped beneath the arc of steel, launching himself into the air. The first form of the soul-chasing thunderbolt was meant to be a flawless vertical descent. Blinding golden lightning violently crackled around his weapon as the primordial thunderclap staff awakened. With crushing momentum, he slammed the surging weapon directly into the skull of the orc. The divine strike pierced through bone and armor like paper. The beast was pathetically fragile compared to his fears. A thrilling rush of victory pumped through his veins as the massive creature crumpled lifelessly to the dirt. Juhyuk stood proudly over his conquest. The sheer ease of the battle was intoxicating. Drunk on his own newfound strength, he excitedly locked onto his next victim and charged forward. But out of nowhere, Gobang ruthlessly stomped his intended prey into dust. Both towering summons shot him a warning glare. Sweating nervously, Juhyuk awkwardly laughed it off, muttering that he only needed one kill anyway. The system chimed in his ears. The 21st floor mission was officially complete, and a radiant light engulfed him as he leveled up. His inventory flooded with incredible loot. He acquired 2.1 kilograms of pure magic stones, alongside 5 legendary, tower-exclusive healing potions. But the rewards did not stop there. The system announced a brand new record, crowning him with an S+ rank for the 21st floor of the Korea Black Tower, while granting him another prestigious platinum badge. When dawn broke the next day, he challenged the Abyss once more, where his overpowered minions graciously allowed him to execute exactly one desert orc. The notification screen flashed brilliantly. He had utterly shattered expectations again, seizing a glorious S++ rank on the 22nd floor. The daily routine became a hilarious cycle of absolute dominance. After dealing the finishing blow to a single cave orc, he predictably walked away with another S+ rank on the 23rd floor. Even the blazing fury of the volcano orc put up a fight, but Juyuk still snagged the final strike, scaling the towering nightmare one floor at a time. Having Jon and Gobang as his unstoppable vanguard made the impossible seem easy. The system showered him with glory once more, validating his effortless conquest of the 24th floor with a dazzling S++ rank. Time ticked forward to a monumental milestone. The formidable 25th floor was finally within his grasp. Stealing 1 kill per battle was hardly making him a god, but he desperately needed to forge a legendary reputation. There was just one lingering problem. Because his 2 fierce guardians were constantly attached at the hip, he had completely missed the window to bestow a secret treasure. The timing was finally perfect. Resolving to gift Jon the mythical rune, Juhyuk chanted the incantation and called his loyal shadow forth. The warrior manifested with a confused gaze, remembering his master had declared today a day of rest. Feigning nonchalance, Juhyuk tossed the mystical stone through the air, playfully claiming it was just some random roadside junk. Catching the artifact, Jon tilted his head and seriously asked if this was a snack to be devoured. Juhyuk chuckled, urging him to actually inspect its terrifying properties first. The second the true nature of the item registered, the mighty warrior turned to absolute stone. Resting in his palm was a summoned entity rank-up rune, a heaven-defying treasure capable of evolving the very existence of a subordinate. His mind short-circuited in sheer disbelief. As Juhyuk casually asked if it met his standards, the voice of Jon trembled, asking if his master was truly bestowing such a divine gift upon him. Consuming this artifact meant ascending to the legendary SSR rank. The overwhelming grace of his master shook him to his core. With this newfound power, he could become an impenetrable shield for his lord. A blinding, uncontrollable smile erupted across the face of the stoic warrior. Watching his faithful companion light up with such pure joy sent a warm wave of pride straight through the heart of Juhyuk. Ready for the evolution, Juhyuk asked if they should trigger the awakening immediately. Jon desperately wanted to, but his battle instincts warned that rushing a forced evolution could lead to catastrophic failure. Juhyuk nodded in solemn understanding. Transcending mortal limits was no laughing matter. Jon respectfully requested to retreat into the summoning space to conduct the sacred ritual with the utmost focus. He vowed to return reborn with terrifying new strength. Feeling unexpectedly lonely at the sudden departure, Juhyuk gently offered that he could just hang out in the living room for a bit. Instantly dropping his dramatic warrior persona, Jon plopped down to watch some television. He demanded to know which channel the drama rerun was airing on, prompting Juhyuk to suggest renting it on VOD instead. The summon clicked his tongue in absolute annoyance. For a master swimming in magical riches, his obsession with hoarding pennies was utterly baffling. As Jon rapidly clicked through the endless channels, a fleeting image completely paralyzed Juhyuk. He barked a frantic order to stop right there. Startled, Jon cautiously asked what had triggered such a violent reaction. The voice of Juhyuk shook as he commanded him to flip back. He ordered Jon to retrace the broadcast until the screen locked onto a painfully familiar face. All the air vanished from his lungs. Why on earth was his beloved mother headlining the local news? There she stood, dwarfed by a towering corporate monolith, gripping a heavy protest sign that screamed, "Oppose unfair contract termination." The bold letters continued to broadcast her desperate plea to the world. "Demand basic human rights for service workers, eradicate the poison of corporate tyranny." Beneath her weary exterior, a fierce sense of injustice burned like wildfire. It all traced back to a wildly entitled customer who had arrogantly ordered her to haul out dirty recycling during a standard water purifier maintenance check. Treating a technician like a personal maid was absolutely absurd. And yet, the corrupt corporate suits had spinelessly demanded that she bow her head and beg the abusive client for forgiveness. Her pride as a hard-working mother would not shatter so easily. She stood her ground and flat-out refused, knowing her conscience was completely spotless. Because she refused to throw away her dignity, the heartless executives slapped her with a cruel termination notice. Abandoned by her peers, she had weathered the bitter cold, standing completely alone on that pavement for over 10 grueling days. Her righteous battle was met with nothing but sickening sneers from the vultures in the executive suites. The arrogant elites chuckled, treating her desperate fight for survival like a pathetic imitation of a television soap opera. One more condescending smirk, and she felt ready to tear down their glass doors with her bare hands. As her blood boiled with righteous fury, an unknown shadow suddenly stepped into her path. Bracing herself for another wave of corporate poison, she assumed he was just another lapdog sent to chase her away with absolute nonsense. But fate had flipped the script. The mysterious stranger offered a warm, empathetic smile, gently acknowledging the absolute hell she had endured. Adjusting his suit, he smoothly introduced himself as Chang Shuk, an elite attorney representing the powerhouse law firm Park and Kim. The mere mention of a law firm made her freeze. A storm of anger and deep suspicion flashed across her eyes. Assuming this was another corporate dog sent to silence her, she gritted her teeth. "Go ahead and sue," she challenged, refusing to bow down. Her fierce determination hung in the air, but the suited man simply offered a reassuring smile. "Please, breathe," he murmured. "I am here to fight for you, not against you." Sliding a sleek business card across the table, he made an unbelievable proposal. He wanted to drag Jinspring Water Corporation through a ruthless legal battle. The golden letters read Park and Kim, absolute titans in the Republic of Korea's legal world. And their elite services? Offered completely free of charge. He revealed that her desperate petition to the labor office had reached his ears. A powerful mutual connection had pulled some strings to send him her way. He swore on his honor that this was no trap. Yet, years of hardship kept her guard raised high. He smoothly explained it away as the firm's annual charity project for the socially vulnerable. Her instincts screamed that there was a hidden agenda, but his eyes held undeniable sincerity. Caught in a whirlwind of doubt, she hesitated. The lawyer gently urged her to accept it. "Consider this heaven's reward for your endless suffering," he insisted. He promised that his legendary firm would stake its very name and honor on securing her absolute victory. With her back already pushed against the wall, it was time to gamble everything. She accepted his sword. The attorney's eyes gleamed with deep respect at her unwavering resolve. The first strike? A full-blown media war. In the blink of an eye, a sea of flashing cameras and hungry reporters surrounded her. He had given her one crucial piece of advice. "Take all the time you need, let your voice be heard. Pour out every ounce of your pain," he had commanded. Every single drop of corporate tyranny would become their ultimate weapon. It was time to rip off the company's mask before the entire nation. She nodded, her spirit blazing like wildfire. Meanwhile, miles away, a crushing wave of guilt suffocated Juyuk. His mother had been fighting a solitary war while he was completely blind to it. Seeing the image of her staging a lonely protest shattered his heart. What was the point of raising two sons if they couldn't even protect her? The bitter taste of being an unfilial failure choked him. They were practically useless in her darkest hour. But a sudden realization hit him. How did a struggling mother afford elite legal counsel? The name Park and Kim wasn't just famous. It was legendary. A mountain of gold wouldn't be enough to buy even a minute of their time. Sensing his master's inner turmoil, John stepped out of the shadows. "Shall I silence the Jinspring executives?" he whispered, the cold steel of his daggers already thirsty for blood. Juyuk appreciated his loyal companion's deadly intuition. It was a tempting offer, but he quickly ordered John to stand down. Bloodshed wouldn't solve this. Through the broadcast, he could tell an incredibly formidable lawyer was pulling the strings. John lowered his blades, looking utterly heartbroken that he couldn't slice anyone's throat today. The shadowy assassin had wanted to present a perfectly executed massacre as a filial gift. Ignoring him, Juyuk resolved to flood his mother's account with the ultimate legal war chest. His dungeon raids had yielded 21 kilograms of high-grade magic stones, easily worth 10 million won. If that wasn't enough to feed the legal beast, he was fully prepared to liquidate his rare energy shield kit too. Suddenly, his phone shattered the tense silence. It was his father. The moment he answered, an eager voice asked if he had watched the breaking news. Juyuk confirmed he had, but his father's next words dropped like a bombshell. "Don't stress, son. The legal titans are fighting for us completely free of charge." Juyuk froze in his tracks. Free of charge? He had practically been ready to empty his entire Awakener treasury for this fight. His father's warm laughter echoed through the speaker. He assumed his boy couldn't possibly summon a mountain of cash overnight. "Just focus on your own path," he encouraged gently. "Leave the grown-up battles to us." But the mysterious miracles didn't end there. His father excitedly revealed that he had just received a miraculous call from Ilsung Hospital. Their legendary orthopedics department was rolling out a top-tier hip joint surgery program. Out of countless desperate patients, his father had somehow been chosen as the lucky recipient. Admission was scheduled in mere days, and the absolute kicker? The elite surgery, premium hospitalization, and intensive rehab wouldn't cost them a single penny. While his father praised the heavens for their sudden streak of golden luck, a cold, creeping suspicion began wrapping around Juyuk's spine. Blissfully unaware, his father ordered him to stop worrying about the family. Juyuk forced a smile into his voice, promising to visit the hospital the moment he could. Ilsung Hospital wasn't just a clinic. It was a colossal medical fortress, backed by a mega corporation. This string of impossible blessings was starting to reek of calculated interference. Right on cue, his younger brother Minhyuk's caller ID flashed on the screen. The gears in Juhyuk's mind were spinning violently. The web of coincidences was growing far too thick to ignore. Minhyuk's voice crackled with raw fury. "Did you see what they did to Mom?" he growled, practically ready to tear the corporate bastards apart with his bare hands. Their mother had bled for that company, sacrificing her flesh and bone to keep them afloat. Juhyuk felt the weight of that tragic truth heavier than anyone else. Swallowing his rage, Minhyuk declared his own sacrifice. He was going to empty his entire savings account to fund the coming legal bloodbath. Juhyuk quickly reminded him about the essential laptop he desperately needed for his studies. But Minhyuk just scoffed confidently. He had plenty of cash left over, even with tuition fully handled. How? Because a massive, unexpected scholarship had just dropped into his lap. Right at that very second, he was beaming inside the university's financial aid office. The younger brother laughed brightly, utterly convinced that the heavens were finally rewarding their family's honest struggles. Juhyuk's eyes narrowed. "Who exactly is funding this scholarship?" he pressed. The answer sent shockwaves through his mind. It was a full-ride grant, straight from the Awakener Management Administration. Minhyuk brushed it off as a standard annual government handout. Hiding the storm brewing in his eyes, Juhyuk simply told his brother to study hard and stay safe. The final puzzle piece slammed into place. The universe wasn't answering their prayers. The elite law firm, the billionaire hospital treatment, the sudden golden scholarship. They were all threads in the exact same web. There was zero room for doubt left in his mind. This absolute tidal wave of VIP treatment was a calculated shadow play orchestrated by the mighty Awakener Management Administration. Meanwhile, hidden behind the tinted windows of a luxury sedan, Guangjil's phone suddenly vibrated. A cryptic voice echoed through the receiver. A secret meeting had just been called, and the real game was about to begin. Guangjil eagerly agreed, even offering a personal escort for their meeting. Soon, the two sat face-to-face inside an exclusive, dimly lit private dining room. Juhyuk cut straight to the chase. He demanded to know the reason behind all these sudden favors. Feigning total ignorance, Guangjil simply asked what he meant. Juhyuk laid it all out. His mother's magically cleared lawsuit, his father's paid hospital bills, and his brother's highly suspicious scholarship. Without missing a beat, Guangjil calmly replied that it was merely necessary. The truth struck Juhyuk immediately. This cunning executive was not even trying to hide his blatant bribery. Guangjil explained his cold, calculated logic. Any lingering trouble at home would inevitably distract Juhyuk, and a distracted climber would only see his progress in the tower plummet. The logic was brutally sound, but a heavy knot of unease still twisted in Juhyuk's stomach. They had moved like phantoms, manipulating his life without a single word of warning. This extravagant level of pampering was exclusively reserved for the elite squad. Yet, he was bound by nothing but a standard contract. Suddenly, Guangjil's hand slammed heavily against the wooden table. He slid a thick, imposing document forward. The ultra-elite contract. His eyes gleaming with fierce intensity, Guangjil urged him to sign it on the spot. An elite rank agreement. Juhyuk felt the walls closing in around him. He realized with a sinking heart that Guangjil had orchestrated this perfect, golden trap from the very beginning. Yet, heavy shadows of doubt clouded his mind. In his own eyes, his raw talent did not feel remotely legendary or awe-inspiring enough for this. He was jolted from his anxious thoughts as Guangjil abruptly rose to his feet. With sheer disbelief in his voice, the team leader asked how Juhyuk could still doubt his own worth after shattering tower records that no human had ever touched. The words completely died in Juhyuk's throat. How could he defend his crippling insecurities when he had just annihilated 24 consecutive floors with a flawless S+ rating? The realization hit him like a physical blow. His constant self-doubt didn't sound like graceful humility anymore. It sounded like sheer, stubborn denial. To Juhyuk's absolute shock, Guangjil bowed at a deep, incredibly respectful angle. Panicking, Juhyuk frantically begged him to stand up, but the team leader's tone turned grave as he brought up the terrifying, near-fatal incident with Jose. He passionately pleaded with Juhyuk to step into the elite ranks. He demanded that the young climber finally accept the royal treatment he had so rightfully bled for. His face burning with intense embarrassment from the overwhelming spotlight, Juhyuk waved his hands wildly and desperately begged the older man to take his seat. Guangjil doubled down on his ironclad promise. With this single signature, those life-threatening encounters would become a thing of the past. He would be guarded like a national treasure, receiving true VVIP protection. But the very thought made Juhyuk shudder. He awkwardly confessed that having elite bodyguards breathing down his neck 24/7 sounded more like a prison than actual protection. And then there was the fatal flaw. He absolutely could not afford to leave a digital video trail of his miraculous ascents. This was the ultimate deal-breaker hidden within the elite terms: mandatory recording sessions. If the world discovered Jon and Gobang, his secret summons would be dragged into an endless, bloody storm of chaos. Sensing his heavy hesitation, Guangjil instantly dropped a golden compromise. The recording clauses could be completely rewritten to Juyuk's exact liking, and the suffocating security detail was entirely up for debate. That unexpected flexibility finally sparked his interest. Narrowing his eyes with newfound curiosity, Juyuk asked what exactly these adjusted terms would look like. Gwanggil painted a tempting, flawless picture. Juyuk would live completely undisturbed inside an impenetrable fortress of a home. The shadow guards would only mobilize the very second he stepped past the gates. Furthermore, they were ready to deploy invisible shields around his entire family. Juyuk violently bit his lip, desperately chanting in his mind to stay rational and not swallow the sweet poison. But Gwanggil knew exactly how to deliver the critical blow. The second ink touched that elite paper, the administration would gift them not one, but two luxury estates, one for his personal sanctuary and another for his family. It was a devastating hit directly to his soul. What sane person could turn their back on an offer dripping with such insane, generational wealth? Visions of a sprawling, magnificent mansion already danced in his head. Yet, battling his own overwhelming greed, he told Gwanggil that despite the god-tier offer, he needed absolute certainty before making a life-altering vow right at the dinner table. A subtle, victorious smirk played on Gwanggil's lips. One look at the boy's trembling, star-struck resolve, and he knew the psychological war was already won. He warmly assured the young, rising star that the path was completely clear of obstacles. He was wielding absolute, unquestionable authority, granted directly by the director himself. Pushing the golden ticket closer, he tapped the dotted line. Juhyuk's heart raced wildly at the sheer thought of those towering mansions. He gripped the pen with sweaty fingers, but then his hand completely froze. Gwanggil tilted his head, asking if a sudden problem had arisen. Beneath his calm exterior, Juhyuk's survival instincts were screaming. The gears of fate were turning far too fast. He pulled back, desperately asking for just a little more time. When gently pressed for a reason, Juhyuk laid his honest cards on the table. He needed the wisdom of a trusted comrade before officially sealing his destiny. Gwanggil gave a slow, understanding nod and agreed to patiently wait. Fast forward to the very next day. The summoning circle flared to life, and Jon emerged from the shadows, arrogantly announcing the grand arrival of a special super-rare assassin. An earth-shattering iridescent aura exploded from his dark form. Juya cried out in sheer agony, throwing his arms over his face to block the retina-burning, divine radiance. The legendary evolution was an absolute, undeniable success. Jon had officially shattered his mortal limits, ascending to the godlike SSR tier. The holy glow was so suffocatingly bright that Juhyuk desperately ordered him to suppress his blinding aura. Smirking through the fading light, Jon casually asked if the muscle-brained Gobang would be joining their little strategic meeting. Juhyuk firmly shook his head. Before they dared to breach the terrifying 25th floor, a grave matter needed to be addressed. This was a secret tactical council, meant for Jon's sharp ears alone. Jon chuckled with dark, arrogant amusement, entirely agreeing. After all, expecting a strategic, high-level debate with that simple-minded berserker was a complete fool's errand anyway. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Juhyuk recounted his intense, high-stakes encounter. He detailed his secretive meal with the powerful executive from the Awakener Management Administration. He laid out the jaw-dropping elite terms of the contract, confessing the heavy dilemma severely weighing on his soul. Should he hide in the safe shadows of the standard squad, or step into the blinding, dangerous spotlight of the elite force? Turning to his absolute greatest weapon, he asked for a final verdict. Without a fraction of a second's hesitation, Jon fiercely voted for the path of the elites. In the Master Assassin's eyes, Juhyuk already possessed the terrifying might of a national authority rank. He deserved nothing less than a literal king's treatment. Yet Juhyuk's mind still swirled with a hurricane of anxious doubts. Signing that heavy paper meant dancing with death. The administration could eventually force them to conquer the nightmare-inducing 60th floor or beyond, but Jon simply smirked, radiating an absolute terrifying aura of confidence. Clenching his fists, Juhyuk swore to train his own body to the bone so he wouldn't drag his overpowered summons down. But Jon instantly shot that pathetic, humble notion right out of the sky. The master didn't need to throw himself into the bloody jaws of death. His only absolute sacred mission was to survive and breathe. In this twisted game of fate, his mere existence was his greatest, most legendary superpower. Juhyuk tried to protest, but Jon shut him down with a heavy truth. His only real job? Just surviving long enough for destiny to unfold. The assassin revealed a mind-blowing secret. In his original dimension, absolute monsters existed. Countless legendary SSR entities that defied imagination. As long as the main character kept breathing, fate would eventually deliver every single one of those apex predators directly into his hands. And the best part? They would bow to him with absolute, unwavering loyalty. Bound by the 3 sacred laws, they would execute his every command without hesitation. Stunned by the revelation, Juhyuk wondered if that was the ceiling of his power. But Jon dropped another bombshell. Beyond the ranking system, lurking in the shadows of the cosmos, were demigod-class calamities. Beings that completely shattered the very concept of human limits. A fire ignited in our hero's eyes. Could he really command unranked mythical beasts like that? Jon kept it brutally honest. Not right now. His master's true path to absolute dominance was simple. Survive at all costs and spam that random summon ability. This was his trump card, his ultimate path to godhood. With a cooldown of just 1 month, he was guaranteed 12 lottery pulls a year. Combine that with rare cooldown items, and the numbers would skyrocket. In just 365 days, he could command an army of unstoppable titans. Of course, a terrible string of gacha luck could ruin everything. Right now, the system timer mocked him with 19 days, 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 8 agonizing seconds left. Changing the subject, Jon's tone grew deadly serious. He warned his master to demand exactly one condition from the guild. He had to secure absolute, unquestionable authority over his own tower climbs. No outside interference on uncleared floors, period. Juyuk blinked in sheer surprise. He hadn't even realized he could dictate terms to the higher-ups. But his shadowy companion stressed that this was a matter of life and death. Without that ironclad guarantee, greedy politicians and cowardly elites would relentlessly pressure him. They would treat him like a disposable pawn for their own glory. And before he knew it, he would be shoved into a slaughterhouse floor completely unprepared. The assassin's voice carried a rare, haunting intensity. It was obvious this warning was forged from bloody, painful memories. A master must never become a puppet on someone else's strings. But as long as he held the reins to his own destiny, draining the government's resources was the perfect strategic move. Shocked that the cynical assassin was actually endorsing the alliance, Juyuk offered a grateful nod. With his mind set, he channeled his mana and called forth Gobang. The massive warrior bowed respectfully to his liege. But lurking right behind him, Jon crossed his arms, demanding to know where his greeting was. Gobang scoffed, proudly declaring that a true warrior doesn't bow to randoms. Smirking, Jon unleashed his aura, arrogantly announcing his brand new SSR status. He mockingly spelled it out. Special, super, rare. 2 whole glorious S tiers stacked on top of an R, while Gobang was stuck at the very bottom of the food chain. The giant sulked, muttering that the assassin was being incredibly petty. Jon ruthlessly barked at him to stay quiet, enforcing the absolute hierarchy between a legend and an rank scrub. Juyuk couldn't help but sigh. Poor Gobang was completely avoiding the assassin's piercing gaze, crushed by the sheer weight of a 2-rank difference. Even a muscle-headed berserker knew when he was hopelessly outclassed. Watching this tragic comedy, our hero made a silent vow. The very next time a rank-up rune dropped, he was feeding it straight to the big guy. Shaking off the banter, he asked his elite assassin if securing another platinum clear badge was possible today. Jon simply scoffed. Was that even a question for an SSR? With absolute confidence, the trio stepped through the portal into the 25th floor of the Korea Black Tower. The system window flared to life. The objective? Annihilate 100 orcs of any class, plus their chieftain, all within a 10-hour time limit. A terrifying green wave of roaring monsters instantly locked onto their position. Gripping his weapon, Juyuk prepared to clash with a few of the vanguard. But Jon casually stepped forward. This entire army was nothing but a warm-up, a bloody celebration of his awakening. He ordered Gobang to act as the ultimate meat shield, and the giant lunged into the fray without hesitation. Sprinting like a runaway freight train, Gobang launched himself into the sky. The brutal orc warriors froze in utter bewilderment as a mountain of muscle eclipsed the sun above them. That split second of distraction was all the assassin needed. The SSR vanished. His speed shattered the sound barrier, leaving behind nothing but a blinding streak of lethal light. To his master's mortal eyes, it was like watching a fighter jet carve through a sea of flesh. A storm of throwing blades erupted, instantly impaling a dozen screaming greenskins. But the massacre had barely begun. Jon smirked and triggered his skill, Blade Explosion. The impaled monsters instantly turned into living, breathing bombs. Devastating shockwaves ripped through the horde, vaporizing everything in the blast radius. Forget throwing knives, this sheer destructive power hit like a heavy artillery strike. Thinking he was vulnerable, a squad of elites charged his blind spot. Brutal spears viciously impaled his back. The monsters grinned in triumph, but their wicked smiles instantly turned to sheer horror. The pierced body simply dissolved into thin air. It was an afterimage. In the blink of an eye, the Grim Reaper materialized right behind their exposed necks. Activating Vile Ambush, his daggers danced in a symphony of destruction, effortlessly sending several orc heads rolling across the dirt. The maniacal assassin was having the time of his life. The surviving monsters were completely paralyzed by primal terror, their weapons trembling in their hands. Taunting their despair, Jon playfully asked why they looked so pale, before coating his blades in deadly purple venom. The nightmare was only just beginning. Watching the slaughter, Juyuk's eyes widened. If he didn't move right now, his overpowered summon would steal all the experience points. Channeling his mana, he instantly triggered Shadow Step. Bursting forward with incredible agility, he intercepted a flanking squad of heavily armed orcs who immediately locked their bloodshot eyes on him. Jon's words echoed in his mind. Just survive, just stay alive. But hiding behind his shadows wasn't enough. He needed absolute strength, power that would wipe away the tears of everyone who believed in him. Roaring with newly ignited resolve, our main character charged head-on into the fray. He absolutely refused to be a helpless master carried by his summons. To stand at the pinnacle, his own mortal limits had to be shattered. With razor-sharp instincts, he slipped flawlessly under a massive, bone-crushing broadsword swing. Pivoting on his heel, he delivered a humiliating, explosive kick straight to the beast's rear. The monstrous orc violently planted its face into the dirt, scrambling back up with a look of absolute, hilarious confusion. Power surged through Juhyuk's veins. He gripped the primordial thunderclap staff and unleashed its first terrifying form, the soul-chasing thunderbolt. With devastating force, he brought the weapon crashing down. The monster's skull caved in instantly as a crimson mist exploded into the air. The beast crumbled with a deafening screech, but the horde was already swarming him. Activating Shadow Step, he became a blur of motion, dancing through enemy lines and striking them down one by one. Suddenly, his eyes flew wide open. A glowing system window flickered to life. The primordial thunderclap staff had evolved. Second form, Cascading Thunderbolts, was now unlocked. Pure adrenaline rushed through his body. He had finally broken past the legendary weapon's limits. Ancient martial knowledge flooded his mind, etching the technique directly into his soul. He instantly mastered the execution. But this new power felt entirely different from anything he knew. He spun his heavy weapon with lethal grace. As a fresh wave of bloodthirsty orcs lunged at his throat, he charged forward to meet them head-on. He roared and unleashed the cascading thunderbolts. The heavens ripped open, and blinding lightning violently crashed down onto the battlefield. The crackling energy fractured into 5 devastating streams, incinerating multiple monsters at once. A wicked grin spread across Juhyuk's face. It was a massive area of effectability. From across the battlefield, Jon frowned at the flashing sky. Since when did lowly orcs master lightning magic? But the moment his gaze found Juhyuk, his jaw practically unhinged in sheer shock. His eyes widened to comical proportions. He sprinted toward his master at breakneck speed, violently skidding to a halt just inches away from his face. Crocodile tears streamed down his cheeks as he began his relentless nagging. Had his master lost his mind over a shiny new toy? They had a strict plan to carefully hunt these monsters one by one. Juhyuk instinctively muttered an apology before freezing in his tracks. Wait a minute. Why on earth was he saying sorry to his own summon? Irritation flared up hot inside his chest. He was absolutely sick and tired of constantly tiptoeing around this nagging subordinate. He snapped right back. He might be a weakling in the outside world, but inside this tower, he was the absolute alpha dog. Unfazed, Jon coolly reminded him that keeping his master alive was their only true mission. That condescending tone just fueled his annoyance. Juhyuk aggressively pointed his weapon forward, proudly declaring that he wasn't afraid to face the orc war chief right now. He boasted loudly that he would charge straight ahead and shatter the boss's skull with his own 2 hands. But before he could finish his brave speech, an earth-shattering tremor shook the floor. Right on cue, the monstrous orc war chief materialized from the shadows. One look at the towering behemoth, and Juhyuk instantly shrieked for Jon to save him. The assassin grabbed his master by the collar and sprinted for their lives. All the color completely drained from Juhyuk's terrified face. A massive wave of regret washed over him. He really should have listened to the expert. Jon unceremoniously dumped him safely behind Gobang's massive frame. He barked the order to eliminate the boss immediately. Meanwhile, the colossal war chief glared down at them with pure murderous intent. The assassin commanded Juhyuk to stay completely out of the way, while the giant focused entirely on absolute defense. The 2 summons launched themselves into the terrifying fray. In response, the war chief unleashed a blood-curdling roar. A terrifying aura ignited around Gobang's massive hand. His monstrous fist collided dead-on with the enemy's heavy weapon. Using nothing but raw, overwhelming strength, he literally bent the thick steel blade in half. The war chief froze in absolute disbelief, but the giant showed zero mercy. Both fists slammed down like falling meteors onto the beast's shoulders, producing a sickening crunch of shattering bone. In that exact fraction of a second, Jon completely melted into the shadows. Activating Vile Ambush, his twin daggers painted a lethal flash of silver light. The war chief's severed head tumbled lifelessly to the ground. And just like that, the 25th floor was officially conquered. Golden light bathed Juhyuk as his level skyrocketed. His grand prize, an incredibly dense, 2.5 kilogram magic stone. A majestic notification confirmed an S+ clear rank for the terrifying 25th floor of the Korea Black Tower. Rewarded with a shining platinum badge, the gates to the 26th floor finally stood open before him. Stepping back out into the real world, an unexpected system message chimed. For flawlessly collecting 25 platinum badges, a hidden milestone reward had been unlocked. The legendary Encore perk selection menu materialized before his eyes. A knowing smirk crept onto Ju Hyuk's face. He knew exactly what kind of overpowered boost this was. 4 game-changing options floated in the air: trait enhancement, skill copy, random item, or summon rank up. He felt like he had just won the universal lottery. Without hesitating, his finger smashed the glowing screen. His unique awakened trait successfully evolved. He knew he would have been an absolute fool to choose anything other than boosting his core potential. He immediately pulled up his glowing status window. There it was in bold text. His name, his binding to the Korea Black Tower, and his newly acquired level 26. His core trait was the legendary summoning ability, which had now evolved to support 3 simultaneous entities. Currently, his loyal vanguard consisted of Jon and Gobang. His specialized toolkit included designated summon, random summon, and summon release. Meanwhile, his passive utility granted him daily tower access, along with a bottomless spatial inventory. As for his offensive arsenal, he commanded the elusive Shadow Step and the terrifying heaven-shaking might of the primordial Thunderclap staff. A massive wave of pure euphoria washed over his soul. His simultaneous summoning capacity had finally broken past the 2-entity limit. Counting himself, they could finally form a fully functional 4-man raid party. With about 18 days remaining on his random summon cooldown, his mind raced with exciting possibilities about who his third companion might be. But glorious futures could wait. Right now, he had a much more pressing real-world mission. He turned to his exhausted summons and asked if they were ready for a feast. Out of nowhere, Jon excitedly demanded spicy tteokbokki. Ju Hyuk blinked in sheer disbelief. Was the assassin crazy? The guy had zero tolerance for fiery food. Throwing his shoulders back, Jon proudly declared his SSR status. He claimed his embarrassing weakness to spice was a thing of the past. Ju Hyuk highly doubted that, but wished him luck anyway. Soon, the steaming red dish arrived. Raising his glass, Ju Hyuk toasted their epic victory on the 25th floor and gave the joyous signal to dig in. Gobang practically inhaled his bowl without blinking. Shocked, Jon leaned in and asked if the giant felt the heat. The towering giant calmly replied that it wasn't spicy in the slightest. In fact, he found the fiery red sauce quite sweet. But the arrogant assassin was about to experience a totally different reality. The exact moment a single rice cake touched his tongue, it was as if he had swallowed molten lava. Jon violently collapsed onto the floor, twitching exactly like a man who had just chugged lethal poison. Without missing a single chew, Gobang casually informed his master that the foolish assassin was clearly about to perish. He coldly suggested tossing the body out and rolling the gacha for a brand new companion. Watching the absolute comedic chaos unfold, Ju Hyuk fell deep into thought. Having safely conquered the 25th floor, was it finally time to reveal his dangerous double life to his family? Later that evening, he arrived at his family's doorstep, carrying an absurdly expensive bundle of premium beef. Seeing the luxurious meat, Min-hyuk's eyes instantly narrowed. Just where exactly did his brother get the cash for something like this? Ju Hyuk leaned in close, softly promising to explain everything later. His mother, however, was absolutely paralyzed by the sheer fortune he had just spent. Panic creeping into her voice, she begged him to dig up the receipt for an immediate refund. But his father stepped in, gently telling her to let it slide just this once. After the endless storms their family had weathered, their son was simply pouring his heart out to treat them. He gave her a warm smile, urging her to just sit back and savor the magnificent feast. Warmth filled the dining room as they gathered around the table, sharing stories and long-lost laughter. Taking a bite, his father's eyes widened, completely blown away by the godly quality of the premium meat. His mother chuckled, playfully teasing that the men in this house were absolute carnivores. As she brought out a beautiful platter of fresh fruit, a massive wave of relief washed over Ju Hyuk's weary soul. The nightmare was finally over. His mother's brutal lawsuit, his father's crushing medical bills, all of it instantly wiped away. Taking a deep, trembling breath, he announced that a massive revelation was about to drop. Looking them dead in the eye, he confessed his grand secret. He had officially awakened and was now operating as a player. Instantly, a heavy, deafening silence swallowed the entire room. Disbelief painted their faces. They genuinely thought he was pulling some bizarre prank. Realizing mere words would never pierce their skepticism, he knew it was time for a legendary demonstration. He immediately made a call to Gwanggil. By the time the sun rose, the entire family was gliding through the city in an ultra-luxurious black car, heading straight toward a monumental skyscraper. Trembling with emotion, his mother asked if her precious son had truly crossed into the realm of the awakened. With absolute respect, Gwanggil bowed, declaring that Ju Hyuk was now a highly classified, irreplaceable asset to the entire nation. His father and brother froze in their tracks, their jaws hitting the floor at the sheer weight of his new title, an elite-ranked player. Guided to the ultra-exclusive top floor, Juhyuk casually whipped out a sleek black VIP card and scanned it. The massive doors glided open, unveiling a breathtaking penthouse, their glorious new sanctuary. And with that epic milestone, we close the book on today's spectacular journey. If you are craving those intense weekly chapter drops for this incredible series, they will officially be waiting for you on my second channel, Manhwa Updater. So, if you refuse to be left behind on this mind-blowing adventure, make sure to check it out and join the ultimate update squad. A massive thank you for tuning in. Keep leveling up, stay absolutely legendary, and I will catch you in the next glorious chapter.